Chapter 50. Yi Jian's dark eyes narrowed slightly when he walked over. She stood beside him without saying a word. Xia Jinyuan, who was talking to Uncle Jen, secretly glanced at Yi Qian and frowned slightly. Why does this little girl like to shrink back whenever she sees me? Could it be that he had really scared her that day at school? Sure, of course. Xia Jinyuan replied to Uncle Jen with a faint smile. He glanced at Yi Qian again and said politely, "Uncle, I'd like to have a word with Yi Qian in private. Is that okay?" Uncle Jen wasn't surprised that Xia Jinyuan knew Yi Qian. After all, the little girl was the one who helped arrest the 3 suspects. Under the old man's smile, Xia Jinyuan smiled as he looked at Yi Jian, who was staring at him coldly because of his words. His thin lips were already slightly curved. Under the morning sun, the handsome face under the military cap looked even more noble and elegant. Even when he smiled, there was a hint of laziness in his smile. "Student Yi Jian, I still have a few words to tell you about the school. Please. Go ahead, little girl." Xia Jinyuan swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Instead, he turned around and walked in the direction Xia Jinyuan was pointing at. She didn't like to have too much interaction with this kind of dangerous man. She couldn't see through him, and she was used to keeping a distance from people she couldn't see through. "I'm sorry for my probing at school that day, but I hope you can understand our position," he explained in a low voice. His low voice was elegant and luxurious, like the sound of the strings of a zither. "You don't have to be afraid of what I'll do to you. There won't be any surveillance or surveillance." Afraid? It seemed that this major had misunderstood. Yi Qian raised his head and looked at him with clear and fearless eyes. He smiled and said calmly, "Captain Xia, you've misunderstood. I'm not afraid. I just don't want to have too much interaction with you. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." Without waiting for his reply, Yi Qian turned and left. Xia Jinyuan did not think too much about it. His slender and strong hand had already grasped Yi Qian's delicate shoulder, preventing her from leaving without any explanation. "Girl, your temper is really bad. Why is it completely different from what Uncle said?" He smiled helplessly. "Uncle is already looking at us. Are you sure you want to listen to me with your back to me?" At this moment, Yi Qian only had one thought in his mind, and that was, to take down this major. After thinking about it for a moment, he realized that it was impossible for him to do so. In the future she could give it a try. "If you have anything to say, please say it all at once, Captain Xia." "Thank you." When he turned around, he skillfully swung his shoulders. His whole body was like a fish, and he escaped from Xia Jinyuan's control. After nearly half a month of training, coupled with Yi Qian's talent, she had learned a lot. Her nimble movements made Xia Jinyuan raise his eyebrows. He smiled slowly and looked at her quietly with his dark eyes. His handsome face was solemn and cold. "Listen carefully, Yi Qian. We have already confirmed that there is a problem with Liao Jian's parents. Liao Jian is the same. Please help us keep an eye on his movements in school." Chapter 51. Yi Qian wasn't stupid enough to ask him why he chose her. Since he chose her, he must have his reasons. After listening quietly, she nodded. "Okay, I'll keep an eye out." She paused for a moment, then said, "If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. Goodbye." She said goodbye as she turned around. She left as soon as she said goodbye. She didn't hesitate at all. Xia Jinyuan raised his hand and adjusted the brim of his military cap. The faint smile at the corner of his mouth was like a gentle breeze, so light that it disappeared in an instant. "This little girl. Does she see me as a scourge?" He jumped into the car that was already driving over. From the rearview mirror, he saw the backs of the old man and the young girl gradually moving away from him until they disappeared. The sound of the car finally disappeared among the trees. When Yi Qian entered the military barracks, he turned around to look at the winding mountain road behind him. All he saw was lush green trees. Under the blue sky and white clouds, birds flew and left behind a graceful shadow. As soon as he entered the barracks, whenever he encountered a soldier, they would stop and salute Uncle General. Their words and actions were full of respect. Yi Qian obediently followed Uncle Jen's footsteps. He didn't look or ask anything, as if he was a frequent visitor to the barracks. He wasn't curious at all. "Fifth Company, arrange for the soldiers to come over tomorrow night. Have the squad leader prepare a list of names. I want to test them." Standing in front of the soldiers, Uncle Jen's expression was extremely serious. Every word he said was an unquestionable command. Suddenly, a series of consecutive gunshots rang out in front of them. Yi Qian, who had his head down, suddenly looked up. As the gunshots rang out one after another, his heart trembled with the sound of the gunshots. It was as if something in the depths of his body had suddenly awakened. It wanted to break through the restriction and fiercely hit the ground. It's gunshots. The soldiers are hitting targets. Uncle Jen, who had signaled for the soldiers to leave first, looked sideways at Yi Qian and smiled. I'll show you the shooting range later. Today I'll take you to another place. Their destination was also in the direction of the shooting range. They didn't stop until they reached a barracks where soldiers were standing guard. This was a restricted gun room that normal soldiers could only enter twice a week. Familiar with understood, precise and professional. The forward banner was hung right in front of the gun room. All the soldiers entering and exiting could see it as long as they raised their heads. The moment he entered the room, Yi Qian's dark eyes lit up like a small flame. When a normal person saw the rows of pitch-black steel spears that were suffused with a cold light, a sense of fear would have already quietly risen from the bottom of their hearts. But Yi Qian only knew that his blood was boiling. It was a thirst for power. It was an urgent desire to touch them. He turned around and looked at Uncle Jen behind him. His clear voice trembled with excitement. "Grandpa, can I touch them?" There was a cry that came from the depths of his heart. It kept calling him to walk over, reach out, and pick up the rows of guns that were gleaming with a dark cold light. Chapter 52. She finally knew what it was that wanted to break through the restriction in her body. It was a desire to become stronger and more perfect. "Haha, aren't you afraid, little girl?" Uncle Jen laughed as he looked at the little girl whose eyes lit up when she saw the gun. His wrinkled face was full of smiles. "These are all guns, real guns that can be used once they are loaded with bullets. They are not the toy guns you have seen before." Yi Qian shook her head and smiled. "I'm not afraid. Principal Chin taught me that you can only truly control a gun if you develop feelings for it. Let it become your helper, a helper that can save your comrades in times of danger." He's right. Before you develop feelings for a gun, you have to understand it first. The little girl's eyes were filled with excitement, but there was no sign of fear. Uncle Jen saw this and laughed in his heart. He walked to the front of the rows of steel guns and casually picked up an assault rifle. As he quickly disassembled it, he energetically said, "N70AB2 Russian Kalashnikov AK-101 assault rifle, NATO 5. 6mm ammunition." It was designed by the former Soviet Union's famous gun designer, Kalashnikov, commonly known as a submachine gun. Uncle Jen dismantled the gun very quickly. At the same time, he used special tools. In less than 5 minutes, the assault rifle was dismantled by him into a pile of parts. "How many parts did I dismantle just now?" Uncle Jen pointed at the scattered gun parts on the table and suddenly asked, "Give me a number." From the moment he picked up the gun, he was already in the middle of training. Yi Qian pointed at the parts on the table. Her clear black eyes contained a faint smile as she said, "This is the last part that you put down. This is the 47th part that was dismantled. This is the part that you dismantled at step 74. Grandpa, you dismantled a total of 80 parts. Am I right?" Not only was he right, but he was very accurate. After half a month of teaching, Yi Qian had already developed the ability to enter the training state at any time. Whether it was Principal Chen or Uncle Jen, they loved to ask questions suddenly. Uncle Jen laughed again and said, not bad at all. While observing, you are also better at understanding. The 47th part is the recoil spring lock. When the bullet is fired, the bolt will lock the thinnest part of the gun so that the gun won't return to its original position. Thus, the gun can continue to fire continuously. The 74th part is called the gun buckle. Its function is, as Uncle Jen picked up the parts one by one and explained them one by one, Yi Qian, who had zero knowledge of the gun's structure, began to understand it. For the whole day, Uncle Jen kept dismantling the guns, while Yi Qian kept repeating how many parts each gun had and what they were used for. Assault rifles, shotguns, semi-automatic pistols, manual rifles, revolvers. Not only had she touched a series of firearms, but she had also disassembled them herself. She had a deeper understanding of them. Revolver, ejector lever, central spring, rebounding block lever, camera body. Yi Qian mumbled as she walked towards the classroom with her textbook in her arms. She recalled the knowledge she had learned yesterday and this morning over and over again in her mind. Chapter 53. And Jessen chased after Yi Qian from behind. She had already called out to him several times, but there was no response. She couldn't help but feel worried. Just as she was about to catch up, Yi Qian sensed something and looked back. He happened to see the worry on her face clearly. "What's wrong? You don't look too good." "No, I called out to you 3 or 4 times but there was no response. I got mad." Yi Qian's smile was still bright and beautiful. There was no change in his expression. And Jessen secretly let out a sigh of relief. Sorry, I was studying and didn't hear you. Yi Qian saw her expression and calmly waved the book in his hand. He smiled and said, once the holidays are over, the midterm exams are coming up. I have to hurry up and study. There was no time at night, no time on Saturday, and no time on Sunday. She could only squeeze in time to study for the entire semester. That's right, Yi Qian was studying for the entire semester, not just what he had already studied. And Jessen's worries were swept away. She giggled and said, okay, it just so happens that I also need to study. After the evening self-study session, let's each do 10 questions in the classroom before we go back to the dorm? She waved the test papers in her hand and looked at Yi Qian with a pleading expression. Do me a favor and finish this test paper with me. My mom bought it. Was this what you were worried about? Yi Qian took the 2 sets of test papers from her hands and casually flipped through them. He smiled at her and said, these are very simple questions. What's there to worry about? Listen, Ying, listen. Some people just don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Xie Xifeng's cold voice came from behind her. She mocked, does she really think she's that great? And Jessen stopped in her tracks. She tugged on Yi Qian's sleeve and said in a low voice, she took half a month off. Isn't she afraid that she won't be able to keep up? She's the one who thinks she's infallible. She was referring to Ying, who took 2 weeks off. Based on my understanding of her, taking half a month off is definitely not a break. Yi Qian didn't turn around. He smiled faintly and said, Teacher Ku has to leave the school during the lunch break. He even brought along the math teacher from class 3. Guess where the 2 teachers are going? And Jessen immediately thought of something and exclaimed, it can't be. Of course. So, classmate, and work hard. Yi Qian raised his eyebrows and smiled, ignoring the stares coming from behind him. Ying had always been smart. How could she lose her final advantage in school? At this moment, Ying coldly retracted her gaze. At the same time, she pursed her lips tightly and lifted her chin slightly. She said to Xie Xifeng, why do you care about her? What will happen to arrogant people? That's right. What would happen to an arrogant and complacent person like her? Yi Qian, who had walked to the door of the classroom, turned around and smiled at her. The corners of his mouth curved into a cold sneer. Ying, I will crush your pride with my own hands. Their gazes met. They were like fire and water. Ying, who only dared to return to school after half a month of peace, secretly gritted her teeth. No matter how angry she was, she had to endure it. After a series of suppression, Ying finally understood that from now on, Yi Qian would never listen to her obediently. And she could no longer threaten Yi Qian with words like, if you dare to do better than me, I'll kick you out of my house. Chapter 54. There was still half an hour before the evening self-study session. Most of the students in the class had arrived. They gathered in groups of 3 to 5 and had endless topics to talk about. Yi Qian and Jessen entered the classroom. A few students who had gathered to discuss the test immediately said, did you do the last geometry question? It's so difficult. I can't do it at all. Don't ask me. I didn't do it. And Jessen put down her bag and said domineeringly, I don't know how to do it. I didn't do it. It's that simple. No way. You didn't even do it. Yi Qian can do it. Look for her. And Jessen took out the test paper and said loudly to Yi Qian, who was still in his seat, there's still half an hour before the evening self-study session. Let's talk about how to solve this question first. Her voice had always been loud. Even the students who were messing around could hear her. They all stopped and looked at Yi Qian. A student laughed and said, Yi Qian, come teach us. You're much more generous than Ying. Every time Ying was asked to teach her, she had to put on airs. She would either say that she was still thinking about it or that she didn't have time now. Yi Qian was different. As long as she was asked, she would answer patiently even if she had something to say. Ying, who had just come in after adjusting her emotions, heard this sentence. She almost lost her composure. When the student who said this saw her, his gaze drifted. He smiled awkwardly but didn't explain anything. It was the truth. He wasn't spouting nonsense. Ying, who had taken half a month of leave, could only endure it. She sat down with pursed lips and accepted the greetings from her classmates. Only then did a smile appear in her gloomy eyes. Thank you for your concern. I didn't want to take half a month off because of a small matter, she said with a smile. There was a faint smile on her beautiful face just like before. There was nothing different. When Xie Xifeng heard this, she immediately said, what do you mean by a small matter? My mom said that you went to the city for a checkup and found a problem with your heart. She also said that it's difficult to treat and can only be nursed. You can't be too emotional. She also said that you can't even run. What? A problem with her heart? It's so serious that she can't even run? The students who heard this were stunned. Some of them could not help but put their hands on their chests. When they looked at Yi Ying again, their eyes were filled with pity. However, Jessen didn't believe him. She wrote down the formula on the paper and said softly, "Are you serious? You only found out now that you have a heart problem?" Her mother was a doctor in the town hospital, so she knew a little bit of medical knowledge. So what if it's true or false? It has nothing to do with us. You're wrong here. You have to use this formula to calculate the area of the shadow first. Yi Qian smiled faintly. He did not take her matter to heart. Heart problems. I can't be too agitated? If anyone mentioned the love letter in front of her, it was very likely that she would have a heart attack. Suffering from heart disease was indeed a very good excuse. This kind of lie, which no one would verify, was probably Yi Jifan's doing. The students in the class all expressed their concern. After Yi Qian and the others finished discussing the test paper, they all went to Yi Ying's side to greet her. Yi Qian was no exception. When she walked over, Xie Sifeng blocked her like a mother hen protecting her chick. She said in a sharp voice, "What are you trying to do?" She was not the only one who was nervous. The other students also had some thoughts when Yi Qian walked over. After all, Yi Ying treated her like that in the past. Chapter 55. Look, Daddy still has a way. Who would dare to say anything now? Even if the damned girl told her classmates, who would dare to say it to her face? Who could bear the responsibility of a heart attack? The provocation in Yi Ying's eyes was too obvious, so obvious that Yi Qian could see it. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly, and a cold light flashed in her dark eyes. She walked up to Yi Ying. Yi Ying's heart tightened when she met her cold gaze. Suddenly, she saw her raise her hand and her whole body tensed up. She dodged and shouted, "What are you trying to do? Why are you so nervous? Relax." When the students thought that Yi Qian was going to do something, she raised her hand and patted Yi Ying's shoulder gently. She said in a clear voice, "Take care of your body. Don't get angry so easily." Phew. So she didn't want to hit Yi Ying. Yi Ying, who knew that she was being played, forced herself to hold it in. She replied with a fake smile, "Thank you for your concern. I'll take good care of myself." Yi Qian pursed her lips and smiled. Her eyes were already curved. How can someone as young as you compete with her? So what if you have parents? You're digging your own grave. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Qian leaned over and whispered into Yi Ying's ear, whose whole body was tense. "Let's take it slow. Don't be so nervous. You're only halfway through your 3rd year of middle school." Her voice was so soft that it was almost inaudible, but it made Yi Ying feel as if she was being stared at by a beast. The hand that was still on her shoulder felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, making it difficult for her to breathe. Looking at Yi Ying, who was trembling in fear, the smile on Yi Jian's face deepened and her eyes shone even brighter. She calmly retracted her hand and looked up at the students with a smile. "Class is about to start. You're dismissed." She was so easily frightened. Hopefully she didn't get a heart attack. The students didn't know that the two sisters were secretly fighting. Seeing that they were still chatting and laughing, they didn't think much of it and returned to their seats when the bell rang. After Mr. Cook came in, his eyes swept over Yi Ying's face. He walked to the podium and said with a serious expression, "Students, due to health reasons, Yi Ying from our class." Now that the teacher had said it himself, Yi Ying's heart disease was confirmed. The next day, even the students from the next class knew about it. However, Gao Yang was the only one in the class who cared about her. The rest of her pursuers had silently asked their classmates from Class 2 to care about her. Handsome and tall, he walked into Class 2's classroom with an indifferent expression. Miraculously, the noisy class fell silent for 3 seconds. Walking to Yi Ying's side, he frowned and said in a deep voice, "I'll take you to the province for a checkup during the May Day holiday. Your complexion looks rosy. How could you have congenital heart disease?" Her honesty almost made Yi Qian laugh out loud. She looked at the flustered Yi Ying with interest. She covered her mouth and said coldly, "My business has nothing to do with you. Leave now." "My uncle is the director of the provincial hospital. There are still 8 days before the May Day holiday. Think about it before replying to me." Not only did she reject him, she even pointed at his nose and asked him to leave. Gao Yang, who had always been cold and arrogant, endured it. He said something in a low voice and turned to leave. The director of the provincial hospital. Yi Ying's pupils contracted. So his family had such powerful connections. She regretted her harsh tone just now. Yi Qian looked at her small face. One moment she was smiling, the next she was annoyed. He suddenly found it funny. He looked away indifferently and buried his head in the sea of books again. Chapter 56. It was still slightly chilly at night before the May Day holiday season, especially when it was raining, which made it even colder. Yi Jian had been standing in the rain for half an hour. Among them there was a wolf dog that was chained to a leash. It was growling less than 10 centimeters away from her, and its growls made her heart tremble. A sniper's ambush can sometimes last a few hours and sometimes it can last a few days. You never know when you'll encounter danger. Accept fear, get used to it, and overcome it. This is a necessary psychological quality for a good sniper. In the heavy rain, Principal Chen's steely voice cut through the rain. He had spent his entire life training Yi Qian. Be on standby and ambush 24 hours a day. You'll face wind and rain, lightning, blizzard, and scorching sun. Learn to ignore the effects of nature and the environment on you. That way you won't waste a single bullet. The rain was getting heavier, but his words were like a heavy drum in the rain that struck Yi Qian's heart. If you want to see the rainbow after the storm, you must first be able to withstand the baptism of the storm. Yi Qian stood motionless. The wolfhound treated her as an intruder and growled madly. The chains rattled as if it would break free and pounce on her in the next second. It wasn't that she wasn't afraid, but that she was afraid and had no way to retreat. If she swayed even a little, she would be pricked by the steel needles at her feet and bleed. In Principal Chen's words, if you retreat, your comrades will be the ones bleeding. Remember, once you pick up a sniper rifle, you have no way to retreat. You must complete the mission beautifully and eliminate the target. If you don't want to bleed or sacrifice your comrades, then you must become stronger. After an hour of standing in the rain, Yi Qian felt as if her legs didn't belong to her anymore. Principal Chen walked over with a towel and slowly squatted down. He looked kindly at Yi Qian, who had fallen into the rain because of her weak legs. He said slowly, word by word, "Girl, you chose your own path. Walk it with blood and tears in your eyes. Only then will you be able to welcome your peak." He gently placed the towel on Yi Qian's head and sincerely taught her, "You will be brighter than a flower in a greenhouse. You will grow little by little under the sun. Without your parents to protect you, believe me, my child, you will live a more exciting life than anyone else." Principal Chen had already heard about what happened during the day. He had been silent for a long time before he added tonight's training. He was telling Yi Qian that she was different. You relied on your own two hands to get what you want. That is your true ability and no one can replace it. Yi Jian, who had caught her breath, raised her head. Her eyes were as bright as a mirror after being washed by the rain. They were so clear that they could reflect the beauty and ugliness of everything. Raising his hand, Zhang Xian wiped the rainwater off his face. Under the gaze of the elder, he smiled and said, "I will persevere on, not for anyone else but for myself. Don't worry, I, Yi Jian, will never give up halfway on the path I've chosen, nor will I let difficulties surpass me." With a sharp sword in hand, she would cut through the difficulties, cut through the thorns and walk on a broad path. Headmaster Chen laughed out loud and said, "Good," 3 times in a row. He stood up and said, "Good child, you are fearless and magnanimous. Ying is no match for you." Chapter 57. Principal Chen thought for a while, then nodded with a smile. "If that's the case, then all the more you have to work hard. Go change in the hot water room. I have something to do in the front. Tonight's training will end early." She had been in the rain for an hour. After all, she was still growing. If she rushed it, it would hurt her body. When Yi Jian came out of the hot shower, she saw Headmaster Chen talking to a middle-aged man in his 40s in the training room. He was wearing a short-sleeved shirt and a pair of perfectly ironed black trousers. He was talking in a low voice. "Come, girl. Let me introduce you to this uncle." Principal Chen waved at Yi Qian, who had already put on her school uniform. "There's something I'd like to ask your opinion on. What do you think?" The middle-aged man was obviously from a military background. He smiled and sized up Yi Qian. After nodding slightly, he said to Principal Chen, "I've been observing you for a while. This child is indeed a hard-working one." Yi Qian hurried over and greeted him politely, "Uncle?" Then she heard him say with a smile, "Just now, Headmaster Chen said that it's not very convenient for you to live in the dormitory now. If you go back at 11 o'clock every night, it will more or less affect your classmates in the dormitory. See if you can consider moving out." "Move out?" Yi Qian was stunned. She had indeed considered moving out. Especially after seeing Ying today, she wanted to move out even more. She hadn't thought of a plan yet, but Principal Chen had already arranged it for her. The feeling of being cared for and cared for by an elder was really good, really good. "I've thought about moving out, but now I'm still thinking." Before she could finish, Yi Qian suddenly looked up at Principal Chen, then at Uncle Yang. Her eyes were filled with joy. Principal Chen knew that she had guessed it. He laughed and patted the middle-aged man's hand. "Commander Yang, I'll have to trouble you to take care of this child for the next 1.5 years. You're too polite. It's rare that you need our help. This matter is settled. As long as the child is willing, you can rest assured on our side." Battalion Commander Yang repeatedly waved his hands. He was ashamed to accept Principal Chen's gratitude. "She's staying in a room with a separate bathroom and balcony. She's still a student. How about this? I'll add a bookcase and a desk lamp for her tomorrow. What do you think?" You arrange it." Seeing that Yi Qian had considered everything thoroughly, Principal Chen was even more relieved to let Yi Qian live alone in the recruit assembly camp. Not only was it safe here, it also wouldn't attract any attention. Yi Qian didn't know how many times his eyes reddened. He bowed deeply to Battalion Commander Yang. "Thank you, Uncle Yang. I won't cause you any trouble." Before he could bend his waist completely, Battalion Commander Yang's strong hand had already reached out to stop him. He said in a low voice, "You're too polite, kid. Remember, we soldiers are indomitable. Straighten your back." More than one person had told Yi Qian that no matter what, he had to straighten his back and never bend his waist easily. By the time he returned to school, it was already 11 at night. Yi Qian gently pushed open the door to the dorm. Dai Qing's brows furrowed slightly. In order to make it easier for the dorm management teacher to check on the dorm rooms, all dorm rooms were not allowed to be locked from the inside. But tonight it was locked from the inside. Chapter 58. Yi Qian didn't knock on the door. His dark eyes stared at the closed door, a cold smile spreading from the corner of his mouth to the depths of his eyes. "Very good. She's starting to make small moves as soon as she comes back." Without knocking, he turned around and went straight to Njiesen's room. "What? Lock the door? How dare she?" Njiesen's face flashed fiercely under the covers. She gritted her teeth and said, "She's a piece of trash. She's been picking on you since she came back." Yi Qian wasn't angry. Instead, he raised his hand to support his head and laughed softly. "It's a good excuse to move out of the dorm. No, it's an excuse to move out of the school." Since Yi Qian had a dorm that was convenient for his training, he listened to Principal Chen and moved out after class tomorrow. He would use the night self-study time on sniping lessons. And Njesen was immediately interested when she heard this. "Move out? Really? Does that mean I can come out to find you more often?" "Classmaten, wait until I move out," Yi Qian sneered, closed his eyes and murmured, "It's getting late. I'll get up early tomorrow and go jogging." "Is it your line?" And Njesen saw that she wasn't excited at all about moving out. She snorted, turned over and quickly fell asleep. In the dorm, Ying was still waiting for Yi Qian to knock on the door. She didn't expect that when she went to sleep, it was still quiet outside. When she opened the door the next day, she saw Yi Qian and Njesen walking over from the washroom with a basin in their hands. Their hair was wet and they brushed past each other. They didn't even look at her. She didn't return to the dorm until 11 at night for the past few weeks. What could she be doing? Ying stared at the figure that was getting slimmer and slimmer. Even her figure seemed to have grown taller. Yi Ying's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly and a dark, cold light flitted across them. "You're asking me where Yi Qian goes at night? If she doesn't go back to the dorm after class, where else could she go?" Liao Jian glared at Xie Sifeng, who had taken the initiative to look for him. His eyes turned slightly and his face, which had a few pimples, suddenly revealed a ruffian smile. "That's simple. You pay and I do the work. How about it?" When Xie Sifeng heard that there was hope, she immediately said, "How much? We're all classmates. You won't ask for too much, right? Don't worry, 10 yuan is nothing to you. It just so happens that I also want to know where she went when she returned to the dormitory so late at night." Liao Jian's eyes darkened and his face revealed a look of resentment. That brat had embarrassed him in class that day. He had been waiting to settle this score with her. Leaving school at night, that's easy. At this time, Yi Qian was already in the teacher's office. He told Teacher Ku that he was moving out of the school and that he had been locked out of the dormitory last night. Teacher Ku, who had wanted to say more, immediately shut her mouth. She snorted coldly and glanced at Yi Qian provocatively. "Fine, you can sign this letter of commitment yourself. If anything happens, it has nothing to do with the school or the teachers." Moving out? If an undisciplined girl were to come into contact with some bad people outside, it would be too easy for her to learn bad things. Yi Qian glanced at it and signed his name without hesitation. He maintained a polite smile and said calmly, "Teacher Ku, don't worry. I'll take good care of myself. I won't cause any trouble for the school or the teachers." Chapter 59. Her etiquette was impeccable and her grades were improving day by day. This gave Teacher Ku, who wanted to teach her a lesson from time to time, no chance at all. In the afternoon, Yi Jian really packed up her luggage and quilt. She left the school alone with a very big woven bag in her hand. She didn't even look back. And Jessen was holding her textbooks for her and followed behind her like a fool. She still couldn't believe it until she walked out of the school gate. She said blankly, You're really out? You really moved out?" She always thought it was a joke. "Of course it's true. Didn't I tell you last night?" Yi Qian moved her luggage to a common three-wheeled passenger car in town and said to Jessen, who was still in a daze, "Hurry up and get in. It won't be good if your name is recorded." And Jessen hurriedly put the bag containing her textbooks on the car and rubbed her face before replying, "You did a good job." Just now Yi Ying's face was so twisted. How could it not be twisted? If she wasn't in the dorm, Yi Ying wouldn't have an excuse to talk bad about her in front of her classmates. "I don't care about her right now and I don't want to deal with her. I just want to study hard and get into the provincial high school. It's a waste of my time to argue with her. Since she couldn't directly kill her and kick her out of school and leave her with nothing, why waste her energy?" After Yi Qian finished speaking, she nimbly jumped onto the car and waved at Jessen. Then she took her luggage and moved into a brand new place. People came and went after school, so Yi Qian's departure didn't attract much attention. Only Liao Jian, who had a lollipop in his mouth, looked at the leaving tricycle with a cold smile. He walked to the motorcycle that picked him up and patted the back of the young man with the green tattoo on the back of his hand. "Brother, let me introduce you to a hot chick. She's my classmate." "How hot can your classmate be?" "There are two chicks from your province in the restaurant." Their chests bounced up and down as they walked. "Brother will take you to Lele." Brother Fei was a famous hooligan in town and had a good relationship with Liao Jian's father. He often took Liao Jian to have fun. As soon as the motorcycle started, it left behind a trail of black smoke and disappeared into the school gate. Yi Qian, who was no longer restricted by accommodation, began to improve by leaps and bounds. That kind of improvement surprised even Principal Chen. Yi Qian became even more infatuated with sniping the moment he touched a gun for the first time. It was the infatuated bullet that flew unstoppably and hit its target. He was infatuated with the joy of defeating himself again and again. During the entire May Day holiday, Yi Qian followed Principal Chen and Uncle Zhen to practice again and again in the deep mountains and forests. He gritted his teeth and endured the hardships again and again. Target is 470 meters away, hit between the eyebrows. After putting away his sniper rifle, Yi Qian carried his gun and jumped down from the tall tree. He hugged the tree trunk and stepped on the branches. When he reached a certain height, he jumped down from the tree. Her face was covered in green paint and she wore a helmet that didn't quite match. Her palm-sized face looked especially small and delicate. Principal Chen picked up the straw man target and walked over the bushes. He removed the empty bullet that was shot between the straw man's eyebrows and handed it to Yi Qian. "Keep it well. It is also a witness to your growth." Chapter 60. Yi Qian's improvement could be described as godly. The more he taught her, the faster she absorbed. Principal Chen and Uncle Zhen had privately discussed this with each other many times. At the same time, they had more confidence in Yi Qian. Principal Chen opened up the foldable table and signaled for her to sit down. Under the scorching afternoon sun, he began to teach her sniping theory. There were too many things a sniper needed to learn. From learning how to move stealthily to setting up a firing position, from accurately reading a map to taking aerial photos of a battlefield. Even the ability to enter and exit a position while hiding were all things Yi Qian needed to learn. A year and a half in junior high was enough for Yi Qian to absorb all this knowledge that would benefit her for the rest of her life. Only shoot once. Remember, there must not be a second shot. Don't give the enemy a chance to find out where the bullet came from. You only need to shoot once and disappear after hitting the target. Then you'll win on the battlefield. The first shot is a matter of life and death. You need to observe the direction of the wind, the weather, and the visibility. If you shoot from a long distance, the wind speed and the bullet's gravity will change the bullet's trajectory. If you miss the first shot, the target will be alarmed and discover your presence at the same time. The second shot is very likely to be from the enemy's side. Accurately calculate the shooting range, wind speed, and bullet's trajectory. Then complete it based on your feelings. As Yi Qian listened to Principal Chen's teachings, her slender hand gently stroked the sniper rifle she borrowed from the army. Her oily face was solemn and cold. She had already begun to show the coldness that a sniper should have. At night, Uncle Jen would take her to the army's armory to identify the guns, ammunition, and quickly assemble them. At the same time, she had to practice mixed martial arts with the soldiers in the army. In mixed martial arts, Yi Qian couldn't beat them due to her young age and lack of strength. For things like identifying guns and quickly assembling a gun from a pile of scattered parts, she needed about the same amount of time as the elite soldiers. The M16A3 assault rifle has the same appearance as the M16A4, but the biggest difference is that the biggest feature of this rifle is that it has made a big change to the mechanical sight of the Immortality M16 series, so Yi Qian waved the assembled M16A3 assault rifle in his hand and smiled at the soldier who was competing with him. So, I won. You're not holding an M16A3, but an M16A4 semi-automatic rifle. He raised his hand and aimed. The loaded M16A3 semi-automatic assault rifle fired the first bullet. With a bang, the bullet hit the red circle in the center of the target. The soldier who lost weighed the assault rifle in his hand as he watched Yi Qian, who was still a student, shoot the first bullet in a dashing manner. The recoil from the bullets did not affect her professional shooting posture, which was impeccable. He put down the gun in his hand. He was truly convinced of his loss. Even if he wasn't convinced, he had no choice. There was a round of applause. He smiled at Yi Qian and said, "I admit defeat. Unfortunately, you're not even 18 yet. Otherwise, we could still meet at the military tournament. I was opportunistic this time. Compared to you guys, I'm still far behind." Yi Qian's opportunistic remark was based on her own memory. The elite soldier in front of her had been able to accurately and quickly assemble a gun even while blindfolded. Chapter 61. At night, Yi Qian would run with the soldiers, assemble and train their posture. At 5:30 in the morning she would do morning exercises and mixed martial arts. Here Yi Qian was like a real soldier blending in with the troops. Yi Qian was like a role model when she came up to inspect the military posture and military etiquette. She made the veterans feel that they should work harder to succeed. She stood like a pine tree, sat like a bell and walked like the wind. From her body, one could tell what the most standard military posture was and what the most qualified posture was. You're just short of a military uniform. After the morning training, the young soldier smiled at Yi Qian, who was the same age as his sister. He pointed at her uniform and said, "This uniform doesn't suit you." Yi Qian, who spoke and acted like a soldier wearing a uniform, was indeed a little strange. Wearing a uniform that gave off the vibe of a military uniform, wasn't that strange? Yi Qian was still sweating. She wiped her sweat with her sleeve and said with a bright smile, "I promise to wear a military uniform when I'm 18. Her goal was to get into the military's Tsinghua University, the University of Science and Technology of China. It'll take another 4 years. After 4 years we'll all be discharged." After the soldiers laughed, they felt a little sad. The troops were made of iron, but the soldiers were like water. After 4 years the recruits here would have changed 4 rounds. Yi Qian looked at them, her dark eyes shining like diamonds under the sunlight. She gently shook her head and said slowly, "No, in my heart, you're like the sun that never sets. You'll never be discharged. 10 years from now, in my memory, you'll still be wearing a military uniform. You'll still be indomitable men." Under the sunlight, her face was beautiful, and her voice was clear and melodious. Her voice and her smile were like the gurgling spring water in a mountain stream, flowing into the hearts of good men. "We're all looking forward to seeing you in a military uniform in 4 years. Come, let's give you a high five." The leader was a squad leader. They were all scouts who had trained in mixed martial arts. Their tanned faces were serious when they were on duty, but when they were resting, they were like the brothers next door taking care of Yi Qian. In the sound of applause, Yi Qian ended her May Day holiday in the army. After the summer vacation she would come back again and spend another unforgettable military life with this group of adorable and respectable soldiers. By the time they returned to town, it was already close to 5 in the afternoon. Principal Chin smiled as he took out a $50 bill and said to Yi Qian, "Go, girl. Buy a caddy of pork belly and come back. Let's have a drink together tonight." His heart was filled with joy. He was even happier than if he had found a treasure. Yi Qian took the money and said happily, "Braised pork, braised grass carp, they are all your and Grandpa's favorite dishes. You have a good memory. Hurry up and go." Uncle Jen also laughed out loud. He rarely came to town, but he was really happy today, so he agreed to come to town. The market in town was not big. By 4 or 5 in the afternoon, there were only a few stalls. When Yi Qian was picking vegetables, she heard the stall owners talking about the mayor election. One of them said that Deputy Mayor Ye's family could even kick their own niece out of the house, so he was definitely not a good official. Yi Qian's lips curled up when she heard that. If this matter affected his career, Yi Ying and her mother would not have an easy time. Chapter 62. At the front of the town street was a newly opened Spring Sun restaurant. A few girls wearing tank tops and miniskirts were greeting a few customers who had jumped out of a truck. Yi Jian, who was passing by the roadside, walked quickly to Headmaster Chen's house with the groceries she had bought. A bowl of red braised pork, a braised grass carp, a bowl of stir-fried bacon, a bowl of tomato soup and a bowl of vegetables. Principal Chen and Uncle Jen chatted happily as they sipped on rice wine. After the meal, the two of them were a little drunk. Yi Qian packed up his things, carried his backpack and walked towards the recruit camp with a flashlight. The recruit assembly camp was about 10 miles away from Headmaster Chen's home. When they passed by the Spring Sun Hotel, several motorcycles came from the front. Yi Jian, who was holding a flashlight, turned off the light subconsciously and saw the motorcycles stop at the entrance of the hotel after turning a corner. The strong lights of the motorcycles did not go off immediately. They reflected a blinding light on the restaurant's glass door. The night wind carried with it the pungent smell of diesel fuel and a faint smell of blood. Yi Qian wrinkled his nose and walked away quickly. During the day, a few girls wearing tank tops came out to greet him. The people on the motorcycles all got off one by one. "Get out of my way!" A man shouted angrily and blocked one of the girls. He got off the motorcycle himself. "Send the food to my room and ask Liao Yi to come over." Yi Qian's footsteps paused for a moment. When he lifted his feet again, he walked faster and more steadily. The smell of blood in the air had not faded. Yi Qian did not continue walking forward. Instead, he took a shortcut to the recruit camp. When he passed by a village pond, he suddenly heard rapid breathing coming from under the embankment. Then there was the sound of splashing water as if someone was climbing out of the pond. The muddy smell mixed with the strong smell of blood made Yi Qian stop in his tracks. His body slowly crawled on the wet ground. The sound of splashing water disappeared, and the breathing became more rapid. Yi Jian pursed her lips even tighter. This person was injured. Was he a villager from the town? No, that was unlikely. If it was a villager, he could have called for help. She, who was used to being cautious, did not move. It was as if she blended into the night. She even held her breath. In the darkness, someone staggered as he stood up. Step by step, he walked towards the camp on the small mountain. The stench of blood became even heavier. When Yi Qian saw the shadow, he jumped up from the ground without any hesitation. He stuffed his flashlight into his bag and ran towards the stumbling shadow. "I'll help you over there. Come, lean your body weight on me. I can support you." Yi Qian rushed over and grabbed the man's right arm and placed it on his shoulder. He used his other hand to support the man's strong waist. "I know Commander Yang. Don't talk. Let's go back and treat your wounds." After being in the army for so long, he was familiar with the aura emitted by the shadow. It was the aura of a soldier who was calm in the face of death. Chapter 63. When he heard that the young lady knew Commander Yang, the man quietly put away his gun. When he spoke, his voice was already so weak that it was almost inaudible. "Young lady, quickly run over and tell Commander Yang that the target has been alerted. We'll be there soon. Don't talk. Save some energy for when we see Commander Yang." Yi Jian's face was cold and gloomy. The 1.8-meter tall soldier was leaning on her with all his weight. Her footsteps were also steady. Commander Yang was on the phone. When he heard the cold voice coming from the phone, his expression was unprecedentedly serious. "Okay, I'll immediately send troops to search. Report as soon as there's any news. The target is the #1 overseas event in the southern province. Please be careful." A deep male voice came from the other end of the phone. It was filled with boundless killing intent. "In 10 minutes I'll arrive at Fujian town." Yi Qian appeared at the camp's sentry post. When the two soldiers on duty saw her, their expressions changed. One called Commander Yang to inform him, while the other ran into the camp with the injured man on his back. Inside, Commander Yang just happened to run out with the military doctor. He immediately placed the injured man on a stretcher. It's a gunshot wound on his left shoulder. He lost too much blood and fainted. The wound may be infected. It needs immediate anti-inflammatory treatment. When Yi Qian saw Commander Yang, she immediately told him all the details she knew. "There's a problem with the Spring Sun restaurant. 5 foreign men came to the restaurant. One of the foreign men spoke with a Hongkou accent. He's injured." Hongkou accent. Isn't this? Commander Yang looked deeply at Yi Qian and said in a low voice, "Young lady, you might have to work hard tonight." Go back to the dormitory first. The military doctor will come and treat this soldier's wound. Yi Qian slightly narrowed her eyes and said in a low voice, Uncle Yang, you only have one military doctor here? I'm afraid one isn't enough. I know a little about how to treat gunshot wounds. Let me go with you. When this young lady spoke, her expression and words always gave people an inexplicable sense of confidence. Commander Yang nodded without hesitation. Okay, you can help. Yi Qian had been in the medical school for more than a year, and his professional knowledge was even better than the medical students. How could he really just be an assistant? But it was true that he could only be an assistant. The 14-year-old Yi Qian had never been exposed to gunshot wounds before. He had only learned some theoretical knowledge in the army. Anti-inflammation, intravenous drip, wound cleaning, removing the bullet and cleaning the wound again. As long as the military doctor needed anything, she would immediately hand it over. She would even use a disinfectant cloth to wipe the sweat of the military doctor who was removing the bullet. When Xia Jinyuan came in, he saw a slender figure standing by the operating table like a sentinel. When she heard his footsteps, she turned around with a scalpel in her hand and looked at him coldly. It's me, Xia Jinyuan, he said in a low voice and took off his combat helmet, revealing his handsome face. He was wearing an army combat uniform. He did not have the elegance he had when he was in the military uniform. Instead, he walked in with the cold air of the dark night, filling the infirmary with the murderous aura of a powerful army. Yi Qian let out a sigh of relief. So it was him. The military doctor was doing a thorough debridement of the devitalized tissue in the contusion area of the wounded soldier's shoulder. Without looking up, he said to Yi Qian, Left camera, prepare the one-time pulse debridement and rinse device. Yi Qian, who only met his gaze, immediately passed the left camera to the military doctor. At the same time he prepared the one-time pulse debridement and rinse device. After the bullet was removed, he would immediately rinse the wound to prevent anaerobic infection. Chapter 64. Xia Jinyuan took a look and immediately retreated. He said coldly to Battalion Commander Yang, The situation is stable for now. Tell me about the situation here. Miss Jian saw the suspicious target at the Spring Sun Hotel at the entrance of the town. He spoke with a Hongkou accent and was injured. Battalion Commander Yang quickly relayed the information he received. We'll have to wait for the patient to wake up before we know the details. Turning back, his deep eyes glanced at the infirmary with the operating lights on. His thin lips pressed tightly together as he said in a deep voice, When did she learn how to deal with gunshot wounds? Her movements were quite skillful, as if she often dealt with gunshot wounds. Captain Xia, you're talking about Miss Jian, right? She's smart and has a good memory. She's been in the army recently, so she probably learned a thing or two. Battalion Commander Yang was afraid that Captain Xia, who had a cold and powerful aura, would be displeased, so he immediately said, The military doctor said she's fine. She was only allowed to go on the operating table because she knew all the medical equipment. Xia Jinyuan looked at the nervous Battalion Commander Yang and smiled. She's indeed a smart girl. The time on his watch was already 8:37 p.m. He put on his combat helmet and fastened his safety belt. He said to Battalion Commander Yang, Increase the security in the camp tonight. Don't let that girl escape. If I don't escape, do you know what those people look like? Yi Qian walked out of the infirmary and removed his mask. He smiled faintly at the tall figure who had already walked into the night. Of course, if you knew what they looked like, I wouldn't have to run out. Why did this girl? Ever since he had tested her in school, she had been treating him like a little hedgehog. Xia Jinyuan turned around again and smiled at the girl who looked like a little hedgehog. His lips curled into a beautiful arc. Little girl, can you tell me? Height, appearance, characteristics, we need to know all of them. He had to go along with her. She was a girl who cared about her reputation. As a man, it was gentlemanly of him to go along with her. Yi Qian, who wasn't targeting him, ignored his gentlemanly behavior and said to Battalion Commander Yang, Uncle Yang, please wait for a moment. I'll be there in 5 minutes. After saying that, she ran towards the dormitory where she slept. Yi Qian turned on the light, laid out the paper and picked up a pencil. He closed his eyes slightly and recalled the scene at the entrance of the restaurant around 8 o'clock. Speeding motorcycles, glaring headlights, smiling waitresses, gloomy men, and that heavily accented "get lost." The memories in his mind froze on the faces of the 5 people, and he began to draw on his homework with the pencil. Yi Qian had drawn her face, facial features and even her hairstyle. Her drawing speed was very fast. There was not a trace of stagnation in her drawing, nor was there any sign that she needed to erase and redraw. In 2 minutes she had already drawn a picture. A pair of slender hands quietly took away the finished sketch for her. The owner of the hands just picked it up and looked at it carefully without disturbing Yi Qian. Xia Jinyuan's dark eyes, which were as deep as the sea, lowered slightly. He glanced at the little girl who was seriously focused on drawing under the table lamp and didn't seem to notice his appearance at all. A faint smile flitted across his eyes. This little girl was indeed good-looking. Her thick eyelashes were like the feathers of a crow. When she didn't speak, she was elegant and beautiful with a lively temperament. Chapter 65. Yi Qian's drawing skills also surprised him. He only took a second glance at the knight, yet he was able to memorize the other party's face and draw it clearly. This was truly amazing. This portrait is of a man with a Hongkou accent. He has an injury probably around his waist. When he got off the motorcycle, he consciously covered his right waist. Yi Qian handed the sketch to Yi Qian. There are 3 more. Give me a moment. Yi Qian, who had entered a state of concentration, had a cold look in his eyes. When he drew with the pencil, a cold light flashed across his eyes. I checked the wounded man's pistol. It was a QSZ-92 semi-automatic pistol with a total of 15 bullets. Only 1 shot was fired. If this bullet hit the man with a Hongkou accent, he should still be in the restaurant and won't leave for the time being. The Type QSZ-92 semi-automatic pistol used the Type DAP 92 9mm hard steel core ordinary bullet. The bullet had a low density and strong penetrative power. After penetrating a 1.3mm thick helmet steel plate at a distance of 50 meters, it could still penetrate a 50mm thick pine board. Other pistol bullets could not penetrate steel plate. Based on this, if the other party was really shot, what he had to do now was stop the bleeding and then move. Xia Jinyuan's sharp gaze was already scanning Yi Qian's face a few times. Then he raised his eyebrows and asked with a smile, "Looks like you learned a lot in the army. You even know this. There are still 2 more portraits. Finish them in 4 minutes? Is that okay?" When he met her cold and calm gaze, Xia Jinyuan decided to use a coaxing and questioning tone to prevent this little girl from having any opinions about him. Young Master Xia, who had lived for 20 years, had always been the one being looked down upon. He never thought that in a small village he would have to look down upon a little girl. His cold tone softened, making Yi Qian a little uncomfortable. He raised his eyes to look at Xia Jinyuan, then indifferently retracted his gaze. The other 4 are all side faces. Let me try to see if I can get their faces. Since they are the targets, don't you have any information on them? You don't even have a picture? Her pencil didn't stop moving. She drew on the paper with rustling sounds, but targeted questions came one after another. Although I don't know how you arranged it, alerting the target and letting your comrades get hurt is the mistake of the higher-ups. The rest of the paintings were still being painted. Xia Jinyuan, who was beside her, was still silent. If it wasn't for his strong aura, she would have thought that he had already left. You're right, it was my mistake. In the end, there won't be a next time. Xia Jinyuan said coldly. Gradually his voice became low. He took the portrait from the side and drew a portrait from the front. Xia Jinyuan looked at Yi Jian in surprise again. Every time we meet, you always give me a surprise. Rolling up the workbook, Junyan looked at her with a solemn and cold expression. He warned, tonight might not be peaceful. Stay in the barracks and don't walk around. Yi Qian put down his pencil and stared at him. He frowned and said worriedly, How did you get into the restaurant? Liao Jian's father is already there. Don't worry, we will make arrangements. There won't be any more injuries to our comrades. Xia Jinyuan nodded slightly at Yi Qian. His tone was cold, firm and solemn as if he was making a promise. Chapter 66. His back was long and slender like bamboo, tall and straight like a pine tree. His steps were both incomparably elegant and as sharp as a sword. This was Xia Jinyuan, an elegant yet dangerous soldier. She pursed her lips slightly, stood up and chased after him. Captain Xia, I promised to go to my classmate's house tonight. Yi Qian, who had chased after him, turned around and disappeared around the corner of the stairs. She raised her voice and said, I'm going out now. My classmate must be waiting for me at home. The footsteps downstairs did not stop, so Yi Qian had no choice but to chase after him again. She had to go out tonight. And Jessen's mother was a doctor. If the target's gunshot wound needed to be stopped or treated, he would definitely look for Jessen's mother and Auntie Zhou. If he ordered the soldiers in the barracks not to let her go out, she would definitely not be able to go out. The problem was it too late to find Auntie Zhou now? It had been 16 minutes since she found the target. Yi Qian, who could cross 3 or 4 steps in one step, quickly rushed from the third floor to the first floor. She was fast but not as fast as Xia Jinyuan. She could only hear his footsteps disappear on the first floor. Xia Jinyuan did not turn a deaf ear to her, but because he heard her, he needed to arrange for someone to escort her there. In order to save time, he did not stop to respond. Arrange for a sentry to escort Yi Jian to her classmates. Before he could finish his sentence, he heard the sound of footsteps behind him. Dong dong. It sounded like raindrops. How fast was this guy? Wasn't he afraid of tripping himself? Xia Jinyuan, whose face had turned cold, did not finish his order. He turned around and took a step forward. Standing at the bottom of the stairs, he looked up and saw a slender figure coming straight towards him like a swallow returning to the forest. Yi Qian, who had hurried down the stairs, did not expect him to suddenly appear. She reacted quickly and took a step back. Her right hand was firmly holding onto the stairs. Based on her calculations, she could have stopped and not bumped into him. However, according to what Xia Jinyuan saw, she would definitely fall down like a swallow returning to the forest. At the same time, she opened her arms and subconsciously walked up the stairs. Very steadily, she held Yi Qian tightly in her arms like a mountain. When the sentinel walked over, he saw another scene. The woman chased after him reluctantly. The man, who was also unwilling to part with her, felt the same way. He turned around and hugged the woman. It was a completely romantic scene. Soon, Xia Jinyuan realized how abrupt his actions were. He calmly retracted his hand and smiled at Yi Qian, who seemed to be frightened. Be careful next time. What you did just now could easily make people worry that you might get into an accident. The little girl was really thin. Her waist was so thin that he could wrap his arm around her waist. Yi Qian looked coldly at the man who calmly took a step back. He let out a long sigh and stopped himself from grinding his teeth. Looking at him, he said coldly, I've already steadied myself. You made a mistake. In front of this girl, Xia Jinyuan felt that he was not very good with words. His thin lips curved into a helpless smile. When he turned around and looked at the sentinel again, his handsome face was cold, as if he had never smiled before. The sentinel's expression was a little strange. Xia Jinyuan glanced at him coldly and said in a deep voice, What nonsense are you thinking? Escort her to her classmate's house. Be careful. Chapter 67. After instructing the sentinel, he turned his head to look at Yi Qian, who was still standing on the stairs with a cold expression on his face. He nodded apologetically, withdrew his deep gaze and quickly left the dormitory. In the Spring Sun Hotel, Liao Yud, who was found on the card table, used a pair of scissors to cut open his bloody shirt. His expression immediately changed. Quick, go to the hospital and find a doctor. If this continues, it'll be bad. The black gunshot wound revealed flesh and blood. Small streams of blood could be seen seeping out of the wound that was the size of a child's pinky finger. A man carrying a steaming stainless steel pot quickly walked into the room. With a click, he locked the door and said to the pale Liao Yud, Brother Da, it's up to you now. Inside the stainless steel pot were scissors and tweezers that had been disinfected with boiling water. Someone also took out gauze, bandages, anti-inflammatory drugs and anesthetic needles from his bag. When Liao Yud heard this, his face turned even paler. He panicked and said, No, Brother Fei, I'm afraid you're injured somewhere. I can't use this bit of fur at all. It'll kill Brother Fei. Turning his head, he said to the man whose face was as pale as a sheet of paper due to excessive bleeding, Brother Fei, I can't touch this man of yours. I'm going to find Dr. Zhou in the hospital now. She's treated gunshot wounds before. Even though the man called Brother Fei had a pale face, his expression was still fierce. When he heard this, his gaze darkened. He gave a look to the person beside him and nodded lightly in agreement. The small town, which did not have many nighttime activities, was already as dark as ink. Those who slept early had already turned off their lights and went to bed. Only a few scattered lights were still on. Yi Qian, who had already arrived at the town hospital, watched as the sentinel escorted him left. He then walked towards the doctor's office. When he reached the corridor, he heard Liao Jian's father Liao Yud say anxiously, Dr. Zhou, hurry up. He drank too much and climbed a tree. Who would have thought that he would fall and be stabbed in the waist by a branch? Sai, why did I get involved in this kind of thing? Yi Qian observed his surroundings. When he saw that no one was around, he quietly retreated. When she saw Liao Yud leading Dr. Zhou into the dark streets, she chased after them and imitated Jiasen's voice. Mom, where are you going so late at night? I'll go with you. At first glance, it really made people think that it was Jiasen who had spoken. Yi Qian, who had caught up with them, accidentally bumped into Liao Yud, who was walking behind them. She seemed to have dropped something in her hands. She ran over and held Dr. Zhou's arm. "Didn't I tell you to rest at home?" Dr. Zhou, who was in a hurry to leave, did not notice it. Besides, and Jessen was indeed at home, so he did not think too much about it. Liao Yud rolled his eyes and laughed. "Jessen is still up so late and Liao Jianqing is still doing math. I know you're good at math, so why don't we go and teach Liao Jianqing together?" "Sure, no problem." The reason why he chased after her was because he was worried about Auntie Zhou. Naturally, Yi Qian agreed readily. Dr. Zhou still wanted to reprimand him, but his daughter tugged at his arm. It was only for a moment that he felt that there was something wrong with the daughter beside him. "Auntie, I'm Jessen's classmate Yi Qian." Yi Qian's sharp senses felt her body stiffen. He held her arm and walked a few steps faster. He whispered, "Something happened. Just treat me as Jessen." Chapter 68. Dr. Zhou still did not understand what was going on, but he started to feel uneasy. Liao Yud, who was behind him, stopped in his tracks. He reached into his pockets with both hands as if he was looking for something. After touching his pockets, his expression changed. He whispered something to the man who followed him, then turned around and returned to the town hospital. "Let's go, Auntie." The corners of Yi Jian's lips curled up into a faint smile. Her dark eyes looked straight ahead. She was calm without a trace of fear. "Just treat me as Jessen. Treat me as if I want to accompany you for a walk." Spring Sun Hotel was not far from the town hospital. After making a big turn, they could see Spring Sun Hotel at the entrance of the town from afar. It turned out that the lights in the hotel had suddenly gone out. Yi Qian could clearly feel the footsteps of the man who had been walking behind him quicken, but he quickly steadied himself. Spring Sun Hotel was not the only one without power. The entire town was without power. Spring Sun Hotel was a small two-story building. The back of the building was a field and the front of the building was a road. The left and right sides of the building were empty. If they wanted to sneak in, they would have to turn off the lights to catch them. They had to turn off all the lights in the town to avoid suspicion. "Hurry up." The strange man urged them in a hushed voice. The blackout in the town made the man slightly uneasy. Dr. Zhou did not say anything. He held Yi Qian's hand tightly and almost ran with the medical kit on his back. She wanted to find an opportunity to let Yi Qian run away alone. However, she heard Yi Qian humming a song. He was relaxed as if he was taking a stroll on a summer night. He hummed until they were almost at Spring Sun Hotel. Then, the faint sound of night birds could be heard. That was Xia Jinyuan's belated response. He was telling Yi Qian that the surrounding area had been deployed. If Battalion Commander Yang had not told him that the person who sent the special communication method was Yi Qian, his response would have been even later. The faint smile on Yi Jian's face instantly disappeared. She reached out and grabbed Dr. Zhou's right shoulder. After grabbing the strap of the medical kit, she turned around and flashed past. She picked up the medical kit in her hand and threw it at the strange man's head. Everything happened so quickly that Dr. Zhou almost screamed. Before she could react, Yi Qian had already pulled her to squat in the dark. Once again Yi Qian hummed a tune. This was the secret signal used by the troops to signal for the alarm to be lifted. Uncle Jen and Old Chin didn't teach this girl for nothing. A trace of a smile appeared on Battalion Commander Yang's cold and stiff face. He said appreciatively, "You're not careless at all when dealing with them." Xia Jinyuan, who was hiding in the dark, gently loosened his fists. He paused for a moment and said, "She came here with the doctor from the town. This girl is quite loyal. Commander Yang, I'll leave the outside to you." Yi Qian, that bold girl. She really dared. She didn't even consider that she was still a student. As Yi Qian responded to the call of the night birds, several black figures could be seen gliding through the night like cats. Two of them approached the entrance of the hotel. The other one walked to Yi Qian's side and directly dragged the man she had knocked out and disappeared into the night. One of the black figures approached Yi Qian. They were so close that they could feel each other's heat. The black figure asked softly, "Student Yi Qian, you're really disobedient. Are you born rebellious?" Chapter 69. He approached her stealthily. Yi Qian's hair stood on end. She was not used to this kind of close contact. A pair of big dry hands reached over. Yi Qian pursed her lips and ignored the distance between them. Her slender fingers touched his and started making hand gestures. "Do you understand?" He retracted his hand and asked softly. His breath was so close to her ear. His breath was light and she could smell the faint scent of mint. Yi Qian, who was not used to it, held her breath slightly. She tilted her head to avoid the man's breath that she thought was invasive. She pulled Dr. Zhou, who was squatting with her, up and said softly, "Auntie, I'll go knock on the door. I'll have to trouble you later." "Okay, be careful." Dr. Zhou could only vaguely feel that there were more people around him. He could not see clearly in the dark, but he felt much more at ease. Yi Qian raised his hand and knocked on the door of the rolling casket. "Who asked my mother to come here for treatment? Where is she? Why is the door locked? There's no one here. Let's go." After he said that, he raised his voice and said, "Mom, let's go. Uncle Yi drank too much and is teasing us." Footsteps came from the silent lobby. First, the glass door was opened. When the rolling casket door was pulled up, a man's figure appeared. "What's going on? Is there a patient or not?" Dr. Zhou, who smelled of alcohol, asked. "How are we going to see if there's a power outage? Where are the candles and flashlights?" When she spoke, Yi Qian had already walked into the hotel. "It's dark. Let's wait for Uncle Yi to buy some candles before we take a look." It seemed that she could not see clearly because it was too dark. She tripped over something and fell towards the man who was standing like a door guardian. The man, who was not prepared for what would happen to a young lady, was pushed out of the door by Yi Qian. As he cursed, the soldiers who were hidden on both sides quietly entered through the main door while Yi Qian apologized. Behind the house, another 2 soldiers leaped onto the second floor as if they were leaping onto the roof. Xia Jinyuan did not go in immediately. He hid in the dark and fixed his eyes on Yi Qian. He listened to her apology and heard her footsteps as she entered the restaurant. The moment the man turned around to bring Dr. Zhou in, Xia Jinyuan charged out like a cheetah. He raised his hand high and struck the back of the man's neck. "Auntie, don't panic." Yi Qian gently comforted Dr. Zhou, whose fingertips were cold. He held her hand and spoke calmly into the darkness. "Why didn't you light up a light? Where is the patient?" Xia Jinyuan, who came in later, suddenly heard a man's voice. "What are you shouting for? Wait a minute." This voice. He abruptly raised his head, and his dark eyes were filled with shock as he looked into the darkness. This voice was clearly the voice of the man he had struck unconscious. He was surprised, and so was Dr. Zhou. Footsteps could be heard from upstairs. Someone immediately said, "Brother Fei, get the doctor up here. And that young lady, Brother Yud, why don't you keep an eye on her?" This young lady insisted on following her mother. "Why don't they go up together? It's good that she's chatting with us." Liao Yud's voice came out of Yi Qian's mouth. In the dark, it made people shudder for no reason. Xia Jinyuan, who understood the situation, did not know whether to laugh or cry. No wonder this young lady was so bold. She was really skilled and daring. Chapter 70. With Yi Qian's words, Xia Jinyuan no longer had to hide his footsteps in the dark. He assumed the role of Liao Yud and hurriedly walked up the stairs. The man who was waiting for them did not suspect anything. He took out a lighter and was about to light the way for them when he said, "Doctor, take your things and watch your step." The lighter lit up for less than half a second. Xia Jinyuan, who was wearing combat gloves, reached out his hand at lightning speed to extinguish the light. At the same time, he quickly covered the other party's mouth. He stepped forward and slithered his left hand behind the man's head like a snake. After a muffled sound, the stairs returned to silence. The light flickered again. Yi Qian, who was waiting, saw Xia Jinyuan with a cold expression make a gesture to move forward. When the light went out, she held Dr. Zhou's hand and said softly, "Auntie, there's one last step." The last step was to rush into the room where Brother Fei was hiding and take control of the suspect. The second floor of Spring Sun Hotel was the accommodation. There were only 5 rooms in total. Xia Jinyuan received a report from the soldiers who had infiltrated the second floor. Several waiters had been taken control of, and the target's room was locked in the second room on the second floor. Yi Qian took the initiative to approach Xia Jinyuan, who was hiding against the wall. Just as she reached out her slender fingers, they were grabbed by his strong hand and a hand signal was sent over. "Second floor, second room, 2 people." Yi Qian's voice changed to that of Njiesin. She came up and complained, "If I knew this would happen, I would have brought a flashlight. Why didn't I light a candle when it's so dark?" Standing in the second room, she sounded even more dissatisfied. "Uncle Yud, where are you going?" "I brought you a flashlight. Why are you so nosy?" Liao Yud's voice rang out. Then the sound of jogging footsteps gradually faded away. The soldiers who were hiding in the dark were stunned. Xia Jinyuan pursed his lips with a cold expression. He could not help but chuckle as Njiesin talked about this person and that person. Her acting was indeed very convincing. Dr. Zhou wanted to laugh too, but he could not bring himself to do so at a time like this. He raised his hand and knocked on the door. "Do you want to see a doctor? You didn't even open the door?" He spoke with a town accent. "Of course. Otherwise, why would I ask you to come here?" This time, Yi Qian was imitating the voice of the man who had been killed by Xia Jinyuan. Inside, Brother Fei, who was lying on the bed, finally opened his mouth. "Light the candle and let the doctor in." There was finally a faint candlelight in the dark room. The candlelight illuminated a corner of the room, revealing Brother Fei's pale and weak face. He said to the man who was protecting him 24 hours a day, "Go and keep an eye on the doctor's daughter. Let the bastard bring the doctor in." He gnashed his teeth as he spoke, his eyes filled with ferocity. The moment the door opened, Yi Qian reacted quickly and pulled Dr. Zhou to the side, giving the front of the room to the soldiers who were ready to attack. Xia Jinyuan, who was standing in front of the door with a gaze as sharp as a sword, raised his right leg and kicked fiercely at the open door. After a loud bang, the wooden door flew into the room. The speed of the kick was fast and fierce. Yi Qian, who was pressed against the wall, felt a strong gust of wind blow past his face. He felt a slight pain. Chapter 71. Dr. Zhou leaned against the wall with his back drenched in cold sweat as he shouted, "Don't move!" He slowly sat down on the cold floor. Wind blew out from the room without a door. Yi Qian, who had just heaved a sigh of relief, froze. How could the night wind blow out from the room with the windows tightly shut? She seemed to have thought of something and suddenly shouted, "Xia Jinyuan! Downstairs!" She dashed out of the room like an arrow. She was so fast that Xia Jinyuan did not even have a chance to speak. He pressed down on his headset and listened to the report from his comrades behind the house. As he chased after Yi Qian, he ordered in a deep voice, "Take control of the target and escort her away overnight. Battalion Commander Yang, notify the Power Supply Bureau to restore the electricity." Less than 10 seconds after he gave the order, the lights flickered briefly and the electricity supply in Fujian town was restored. Xia Jinyuan, who had chased her all the way to the restaurant lobby, slowly stopped under the bright lights. He quietly looked at the slender figure standing at the entrance of the restaurant. After a while, he slowly walked over and said with a smile, "Weren't you very powerful just now? Why do I feel like you're disappointed?" "Sigh, a little girl will always be a little girl. She may be good but she's still a child." Her little face was just like the weather in June. It could change at any moment. He chased her to the first floor. Yi Qian could already tell whose footsteps it was. After a moment of silence, she sighed softly and looked up at him with her bright black eyes. "I see the difference between us. The difference between us. How old am I? How old are you?" Xia Jinyuan, who was choked by her words, suddenly burst into laughter. He looked at her serious face and could only stop laughing. He coughed dryly and comforted her. "You're already very good. Your ventriloquism stunned my comrades. How old am I? You'll be scared to death if I tell you." Yi Qian pursed his lips as he looked at Xia Jinyuan, who had suddenly become an understanding soldier. His eyes flickered before a smile slowly appeared on his beautiful face. "It's not a matter of age. It's related to the environment." No matter what she had learned, she was still one step behind since she had never received a systematic command education. That was why she panicked when she saw her target jump out of the window. Who was Xia Jinyuan? How could he not have made arrangements? It has something to do with the environment? Xia Jinyuan raised his eyebrows and thought for a while before nodding. He smiled and looked at the little girl in front of him who was very good at reflecting on her shortcomings. He answered her seriously, "It does have something to do with the environment, but in the end it still depends on one's hard work. Now that you have a first-grade sergeant major and a world-class sniper to nurture you, your environment is already better than many people in this world. They created the environment and you have to work harder." As he spoke, his voice suddenly became very serious. "They have put a lot of effort into you, so you have to cherish it. Also, I have to remind you that if you want to become a soldier, you have to first understand the meaning of obedience." He was going to settle scores with her. Yi Qian quietly took a step outside. He had only taken one step when Xia Jinyuan grabbed his arm. "Are you trying to slip away?" Chapter 72. Her attitude of admitting her mistake was good, but it was useless in front of him. "You ran down in such a hurry because you were worried that the target would escape. I can understand your intentions." Xia Jinyuan curled up the corners of his mouth and looked at the girl in front of him, who had a pair of starry eyes. His faint smile had a hint of banter. "Your attitude of admitting your mistake is also very good. Are you afraid that I will scold you?" "What am I afraid of?" I'm not your soldier. Yi Qian, who had a cold gaze, smiled and said, besides, I did go to look for my classmate. I just happened to run into Auntie Zhou. So what if she ran down? He had already set up an inescapable trap. There was no way he would let Brother Fei escape by jumping out of the window. He was just overreacting. Her answer made Xia Jinyuan raise his eyebrows. Then, there was a hint of calmness in his dark and cold eyes. Looking at her, his smile faded a little and he said calmly, if you were my soldier Yi Qian, you would end up in a miserable state. There is a rule in military law that states that soldiers who disobey orders and act willfully will be punished with a warning, a serious warning, a demerit, or a major demerit depending on the severity of the situation. At the mention of military law, his expression inevitably became stern. After he finished speaking, Xia Jinyuan, who had been paying attention to Yi Qian's expression, slowly smiled again. So, Yi Qian, if you want to become a qualified soldier, obeying orders is the first thing you need to learn. When he smiled, he looked even more handsome and elegant. His cold temperament also gained the elegance of a noble young master when he smiled. He was a man who could not hide his nobility even though he was wearing a military uniform. How could he have grown up in an ordinary environment? Every place had its own people. That was why the environment was so important. Thank you for your advice. I understand. Yi Qian nodded gently and took his advice to heart. A soldier's duty is to obey orders. Headmaster Qin and Grandpa Zhen had both personally said this before. However, she had placed her focus on improving her own abilities and had forgotten about this most basic awareness that she should have. The sound of footsteps could be heard. It was the soldiers upstairs. Reporting the second floor has been cleared. Inform the police to seal off the scene. His smile faded and a cold expression appeared between his elegant brows. He turned around and his straight back already carried the piercingly cold aura of a soldier. Gather, withdraw. Yi Qian looked over his shoulder and saw that the soldier standing in front of him had a cold expression on his face. From his serious and meticulous attitude, he could tell that he was absolutely obedient to Xia Jinyuan's orders. Yi Qian pursed his lips slightly. A soldier's duty was to obey orders. Perhaps she understood. Yi Qian's eyes narrowed as he looked at his towering figure. A man like him would not only be able to convince his soldiers with his abilities, but he would also be able to convince his soldiers in all aspects. After everything was arranged, Xia Jinyuan let Yi Qian and Dr. Zhou out of the restaurant. Chapter 73. Dr. Zhou was slightly older than the rest. She hurriedly said, don't worry, we will keep this matter to ourselves and will not spread it. You are a doctor and have the noble professional ethics of a doctor. We naturally believe in Dr. Zhou. Xia Jinyuan said gracefully. In front of the people, his attitude was not as cold as steel, but as gentle as a breeze. I won't see you too often. Once again, I'm very sorry. Xia Jinyuan arranged for a soldier to send Dr. Zhou away first. After she walked further away, he suddenly raised his hand and flicked Yi Qian's forehead lightly. I didn't have time to praise you just now. You did well, little girl. You really flicked me. Yi Qian was caught off guard and was flicked directly. She held her aching forehead and there was a slight ripple in her indifferent eyes. This is nothing. One moment you praise me, the next moment you punish me. Xia Jinyuan was already laughing. He was a man who was very good at restraining himself. Even if he was happy, his laughter was low and shallow, and it was refreshing in the night. You are only 14, not 40. Relax, don't show too much indifference in your eyes. 14 years old is the rainy season. I'm guessing that Captain Xia's 14 years old is not the rainy season either. There is no indifference in his eyes, but at least he looks unattainable. Facing the unpredictable Major, Yi Jian decided to give him a taste of his own medicine. Would a 20-year-old Major live a 14-year-old life like a blooming and rainy season? Was it possible? Thinking about his 14 years old, Xia Jinyuan tactfully kept his mouth shut. The girl in front of him was really smart. It was better for him to say less in case she made him feel angina. He waved at the soldier who was waiting for his orders. Come. Send the student back to the recruit assembly camp. He was only 14 years old. No wonder Old Master Xia and Old Master Xia said he was difficult to deal with every day. The 20-year-old himself met the 14-year-old Yi Qian, who was also a difficult girl to deal with. He suddenly wanted to call back to ask about Old Master Xia and apologize. Xia Jinyuan made a phone call to Beijing after they got into the car that escorted the suspects back to the city. In the heavily guarded military compound, in a quaint military compound covered with creepers outside, a guard picked up the phone. After greeting him, he trotted upstairs and gently knocked on the door. "Commander-in-Chief," the major called and said that he has something urgent to report to you. At 10:30 in the evening, Commander-in-Chief Xia, who had always been on time, jumped out of bed when he heard the call. This guy had never taken the initiative to call. Could it be that something had happened to him in the team? What happened? As soon as he opened his mouth, he suddenly heard the words, "Old man, I'm sorry. I suddenly feel that being 14 years old really makes people worry." Commander-in-Chief Xia had the urge to smash the phone. It turned out that he had been worried for nothing. "Brat, just you wait. Old man, send my regards to old Master Xia. Also good night." Xia Jinyuan smiled and hung up the phone. Commander-in-Chief Xia was in good health and full of energy. "Brat, can't sleep in the middle of the night?" It seemed that he had to make a call and increase his workload. He was always so frivolous. Chapter 74. Xia Jinyuan had always been difficult to deal with. When he was young he would ask all sorts of questions, and when he grew up he would still ask all sorts of questions. It was fine if he asked, but he would always ask questions that were difficult to answer. In the eyes of everyone in the family Xia Jinyuan was the little demon king of family Xia. However, this little demon king was admitted to the military academy in one go, and had performed meritorious deeds several times. He became a major at the age of 20, becoming the youngest major in the family. With such a promising son, Commander-in-Chief Xia could be said to have swept away his previous dispiritedness. When Xia Jinyuan was 14 years old, he had always been proud and elated. This was why, even if he was startled by Xia Jinyuan's inexplicable phone call, he would not be angry. "Contact Political Commissar Zhang of the Nangguang military region." Commander-in-Chief Xia turned around, went into his room, put on his military jacket, and then went to the study. The troops deep in the mountains of Fujian town belonged to the Nangguang military region. The night grew darker, and in the latter half of the night, fog began to appear. Standing in front of the window, Yi Jian, who didn't know how long it had been, suddenly felt that her body was wet. Only then did she wake up from her contemplation. When she looked up, she realized that there was a faint line of gray on the distant horizon. It was already 5 o'clock in the morning. Yi Qian, who had not slept the entire night, did not feel sleepy at all. She quickly washed her face and rinsed her mouth with the sound of the military horn at the recruit assembly camp. 2 minutes later, Yi Qian, who had packed up her textbooks, appeared in the canteen on time. Here, Yi Qian only needed to help the cooking squad wash the vegetables and clean up the place. A week's worth of breakfast and dinner would be ready. Yi Qian, who had been here for half a month, was nimble, diligent, and able to endure hardships. All the soldiers in the recruit assembly camp knew her. "Morning. Morning. You're up so early? Come on, the pickled vegetable buns just came out of the pot. There are also eggs and steamed buns. Whatever you want to eat, go get it yourself." The leader of the cooking squad was from the northeast. When he saw Yi Qian come in, he happily told her to eat more. The soldiers in the class all agreed that Yi Qian had lost a lot of weight and was much shorter. If he ate more noodles he would grow taller and fatter. Yi Qian didn't know if it was because he had been eating well for the past half a month, but he really did feel that he had grown a lot taller. After greeting them with a smile, he ate his breakfast and cleaned up the kitchen. She tidied up the kitchen, tidied up the room, and left for school at 6:30. She liked to jog to school. While exercising she could also strengthen her body. Gao Yiyang, who was riding his bicycle, once again saw the figure running along the national highway. After a slight hesitation on his cold and handsome face, the corners of his lips tightened a little, and he pedaled his bicycle to catch up. He rode directly in front of Yi Qian and slammed on the brakes. His hands gripped the steering wheel of the bicycle handsomely, and with a twist, he and the bicycle stopped in front of Yi Qian. This series of actions was completed very quickly. He didn't consider whether others would be frightened. He suddenly stopped in front of Yi Qian, who was jogging. Yi Qian's reaction was a little more valiant. In addition to what had happened last night, his subconscious reaction was, he lifted his leg and viciously kicked the bicycle in the middle. Gao Yang didn't expect to be met with a direct kick. He stared blankly as Yi Qian, who had a cold and ruthless expression, kicked out like lightning. She didn't hesitate at all and kicked directly. Clang. Bang. Gao Yang, who had been kicked down with his bicycle, didn't regain his senses for a while. Chapter 75. What am I doing? Yi Qian didn't look apologetic at all. He calmly retracted his left leg and smiled. I should be the one asking you what you're doing. If I didn't react quickly, I would be the one lying on the ground right now. Yi Qian didn't like anyone who had anything to do with Yi Ying. Moreover, this Gao Yang was a bit too full of himself. Gao Yang, who was in a sorry state, got up in a rage out of humiliation. As he patted the dust off his body, he faintly sucked in a breath of cold air. He rolled up his sleeves and saw that his elbow was scraped and bleeding. Seeing the wound, he angrily looked up and glared at Yi Qian. "You're really, I'm really what?" Yi Qian calmly interrupted him. "You think I didn't kick you hard enough?" The faint disgust in her tone caused Gao Yang's face to turn even more ashen and ugly. When his gaze met Yi Jian's ice-cold and emotionless black eyes, his heart turned slightly cold. However, he did not say anything else. His lips were pursed into a straight line. He lifted his bicycle and asked as if he was giving alms, "Where did Yi Ying go during the May Day holiday?" "I went to your Shuku village but I couldn't find her." What did Yi Qian hate the most? People like him the most. As if you should be grateful and honored that he was willing to talk to you. With a cold laugh, Yi Qian didn't look at him anymore and walked over. "You're being unreasonable." Yi Qian stopped right there. Gao Yang wanted to ask her something, but when he saw her ignoring him, he suppressed his anger and pushed the bicycle with his left hand and reached out with his right hand to grab Yi Qian's arm. Yi Qian's cold expression had completely turned cold when he chased after him again. Seeing that he still dared to reach out to grab him, a cold glint flashed in his dark eyes. It seemed that he hadn't kicked him enough just now. He didn't learn his lesson. Her patience was running out. She narrowed her eyes and her face was cold. The moment she turned around, she grabbed Gao Yang's right hand with one hand and twisted it forcefully. This boy, who was considered the most handsome boy in school, was in so much pain that he cried out involuntarily. "My patience has always been limited. You've done it again and again. Gao Yang, do you think I'm a pushover who can be easily bullied?" He increased the strength of his hand, and the muscles in his arm could be seen twisting outwards. Gao Yang was already in so much pain that his back was drenched in cold sweat. However, his arrogance was not reduced in the slightest. He shouted coldly, "Let go of me, Yi Qian. Apologize." The corners of Yi Qian's lips curled up coldly. She grabbed his wrist with one hand and grabbed his shoulder with the other. "Removing your arm is just a small matter to me." Her expression was exceptionally cold. Even her eyes seemed to have a metallic glint to them. Her calm tone made it clear that she wasn't joking. Gao Yang's heart froze. He immediately realized that every word she said was absolutely true. She wasn't joking. "I apologize." With this realization, no matter how angry Gao Yang was, he could only apologize honestly. "I'm very sorry. I offended you. Please forgive me." Yi Qian chuckled softly and slowly released his hands. She raised her eyebrows and the coldness in her expression disappeared. She said lazily, "At least you know what's good for you. Let me remind you, Mr. Gao. In the future, you shouldn't ask me about Yi Ying in front of me. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that I won't do anything to make you unhappy. Also, Yi Ying and I don't walk the same path. I don't want to have anything to do with her." After she finished speaking, she picked up her backpack and leisurely jogged again as if nothing had happened. Chapter 76. Fujian town was surrounded by mountains. Although it was poor, the scenery was picturesque. Every morning, Yi Qian would jog along the national highway and look at the mountains and rivers. He always felt exceptionally calm. Even Gao Yang's incident did not affect his mood. Yi Qian's hair was wet from the fog. When he entered the classroom, he saw Liao Jian, who was always late, sitting in the classroom. He was not as noisy as he usually was. He was so quiet that he looked gloomy. When he heard the footsteps of a classmate coming in, his gloomy eyes faintly lit up as he looked up. When he saw that it was Yi Jian, that glimmer of light disappeared in an instant like sparks. He stood up and looked behind Yi Qian. Yi Qian immediately knew what he was doing. He was waiting for Yi Ying to come over. His father was arrested, so he was afraid, uneasy, and anxious. It was normal for him to be anxious to find someone who could help him. Moreover, Yi Ying's father was the deputy mayor. It was normal for him to look for her. He was the one who was not normal. Since when was his relationship with Yi Ying so good that he could look for her? "Yi Qian, here. I have good news for you." Yi Qian calmly looked away as his classmate waved at him. He walked over with a smile. "What good news? Why are you so excited so early in the morning?" The ones who arrived early were always the few who were good at studying. The top scorer in the liberal arts and science class were both present. The top scorer in the liberal arts, Zhang Na, did not wait for Yi Qian to sit down and said excitedly, "The competition for the provincial experimental high school. Which subject did you sign up for? Mathematics? Language, physics, chemistry? Oh, and English. This is an extra point competition. All second and third graders in the province can participate. Next Saturday the teachers will come to our school. We'll sign up later. The top science student Zhou Liao was also excited. He had an extraordinary passion for mathematics. This time he signed up for the competition. Zhang Na glanced at him, then looked at Yi Qian. Her eyes twinkled. She smiled and said, "Then Yi Qian, you're choosing physics? Chemistry? Anyway, you did pretty well in the physics exams these 2 times." Her words immediately put a lot of pressure on the male students who were interested in signing up for the chemistry Olympiad. Yi Qian's Chinese is pretty good too. In less than a month, Yi Qian had already made the top students in the class feel the pressure of competition. The top 3 in this competition would all get bonus points, which would be a great advantage for entering the Provincial Experimental No. 1 Middle School. Yi Jian looked up from the competition registration list and said with a smile, "Give me the pen." Yi Jian smiled and said, "Give me the pen." He bent down and looked at the application column. A string of beautiful English words that could be used as advertisements appeared on the application form. When Zhang Na saw it, she said in shock, "English? English? Would this work? We only learned English in the first year of junior high. Let's register for English first. There are instructions here that a candidate can register for multiple subjects at the same time. All the exams are not done in one go but in batches." Yi Qian smiled and put down his pen. He looked calm and confident. "You guys go first. I'll follow," she said with a smile. The meaning behind her words made the faces of the top students somewhat awkward. Zhou Liao frowned and looked at Zhang Na. He said in a deep voice, "The exam is based on ability. Without Yi Qian, are you sure you can get into the top 3? He then looked at Yi Qian, who was backing down for his classmates, and said sternly, "Don't worry about anything. It's based on ability." Zhang Na was about to cry. Yi Qian patted her on the shoulder and smiled. "Really, there aren't many people who want to register for English. Let's give it a try first. If it doesn't work, we'll take another test." Chapter 77. I'm not bad myself, so what's there to be afraid of? Yi Qian took his registration form and returned to his seat. He filled in all the subjects except Chinese. He could definitely participate in more of these competitions, especially since his goal was to get into the Provincial Experimental High School. There were still 10 minutes before the morning self-study session. Liao Jian, who had been fidgeting, suddenly stood up and rushed over, making the tables and chairs squeak. Ying appeared at the classroom door. If Liao Jian hadn't made the tables and chairs squeak, Yi Qian wouldn't have looked up from his politics textbook. The two met at the classroom door and saw a flash of panic in Yi Ying's eyes. She pursed her lips and said, "Go outside." She immediately turned and left the classroom as if afraid that someone would see her. Yi Ying's expression was much easier to read compared to her previous life when she became a government official's wife. Yi Qian's lips were slightly pursed. In his previous life he graduated from junior high school, but Yi Ying studied in America and became the pride of Fujian town. So much so that when he ran back to Fujian town, he had no choice but to leave and survive cautiously. The biggest turning point of his life had passed. Then let's see who will be king in the future. Who will be the bandit? What are they doing sneaking around? Since when can a bad student and a good student walk together? And Jessen, who happened to bump into Zhang Bin, sat down on his seat and said in a low voice, "I even saw Liao Jian grab Yi Ying's wrist. You seem to be very excited." Yi Qian also felt that the two were sneaking around, but this wasn't what she was concerned about. "Why do you care? Have you filled in the form? The Provincial Experimental High School has a competition for bonus points for the high school entrance exam. Hurry up and talk to Zhou Liao and the others." Yi Qian said without looking up from his book. He had flipped from the first page to the 11th page. And Jessen sat up for less than 2 minutes and had already flipped to another page. And Jessen looked at her as she casually flipped through a page. Her gaze swept from the top to the bottom. Occasionally she paused for a moment before flipping the page again. And Jessen looked at her suspiciously. "Are you killing time?" Even if she were to read books and memorize books, she wouldn't be able to do that. She would only pause on a page for a few minutes. "You shouldn't spend your time like this. Let's review." Yi Qian glanced at her with a smile. He didn't explain anything and only said, "You finished memorizing everything? The last few chapters of the Constitution are a little difficult to memorize. If you haven't memorized them, I suggest you memorize them a few more times. Who knows, you might pass this time." And Jessen was a top student in mathematics, so she was not interested in liberal arts. Hearing this, he yawned and stood up lazily. No. Also, it's not a good thing for Yi Ying to be close to Liao Jian. You should be careful. Yi Ying had always targeted Yi Qian, and a few weeks ago, Yi Qian had even embarrassed the narrow-minded Liao Jian. Now that the two of them had walked to the side, it was better to be careful. I know, don't worry. Yi Qian smiled disapprovingly and ended the conversation when the self-study class bell rang. In the city detention center, Xia Jinyuan received the report from the police. His gaze fell on one of Liao Yid's statements. After a long pause, his handsome face darkened as he asked, "How true is it?" Chapter 78. Xia Jinyuan waved the statement in his hand and pursed his thin lips. His voice had already deepened. I need to make a copy of this statement. Don't inform the local police station about the missing pistol for now. Wait for my news. Liao Yid mentioned that the pistol was still with him when he went to the town hospital to look for Dr. Zhou. However, the pistol was accidentally dropped when he was at the Spring Sun Hotel. There was another important point, and Jessen bumped into him when she ran over. That night, Yi Qian was the one who used her ventriloquism to play the roles. In other words, she was the one who bumped into Liao Yid. This little girl. It seemed that he had to go back and look for her. The Municipal Public Security Bureau agreed to Xia Jinyuan's request, but he had to give a reply within 24 hours. After all, the loss of a pistol with 15 bullets was a big deal. After leaving the Public Security Bureau, Xia Jinyuan drove the military jeep back to Fujian town. At an intersection waiting for a red light, he inadvertently looked at the opposite side. Jun Yen, who had always been cold, smiled slightly, then turned around and parked the car on the opposite side of the road. Less than 10 minutes after getting out of the car, he walked out of the building with a bag and returned to Fujian town. At this moment, Yi Qian was standing in the teacher's office. Her gaze was cold as she looked at her homeroom teacher. After she said a bunch of nonsense, she smiled and said, "Teacher Ku, don't worry. Although I'm young, I know how to act according to my ability. Since I've applied, I'm confident that I'll pass. You're my teacher, shouldn't you have more confidence in me?" Teacher Ku snorted when she submitted the competition form from the Provincial Experimental High School. Faced with her calm reply, Teacher Ku, who was about to vomit blood, said coldly, "Physics, chemistry, mathematics, and English. Do you think you're a genius? Apply for everything. It's fine if you embarrass yourself in school, but don't embarrass yourself outside." To Teacher Ku, Yi Qian was like a fish bone stuck in her throat. She couldn't spit it out or swallow it down. She had to face it every day and felt terrible every day. "I'm the one losing face. What does it have to do with you?" Yi Qian spoke and smiled. Ming Yan's dimples were even calmer and gentlemanly than a teacher's. Her bright eyes were smiling as she gazed at her own teacher. Her attitude, which was neither servile nor overbearing, made the other teachers have a good impression of her. Yi Qian had originally thought that as long as he could get into the top 3 in one subject, the rest of the competition would just be for fun. Now that Teacher Ku was deliberately making things difficult for him, he smiled faintly and made up his mind. If he wanted to take the exam, he would do it to his heart's content. She really liked face-slapping now. Mr. Ku threw the registration form into the drawer and snorted with a straight face. "You've never listened to my advice. You're so arrogant that you're throwing your face outside. What else can I say?" Hearing what she said, they all laughed and said, "Teacher Ku, if there is such a student in my class who dares to rush forward, I will burn incense every day. You must be happy in your heart." That's right. It's a good thing that students are motivated. As teachers, we have to support them. If they really do well in the exam, won't they bring glory to you in the school? Her colleague's words made Teacher Ku feel even more bitter. If it were any other student, she would be happy. However, it couldn't be Yi Jian. Chapter 79. However, Yi Qian was not affected by her at all. He carried his backpack and walked out of the school gates leisurely. Just as he was about to jog back to the recruit camp like he always did, he heard the sound of a car horn. This was also the signal used by the soldiers when they were driving. Others did not know, but when she heard it again, she immediately looked over. "Get in." Xia Jinyuan stuck his head out of the car window and waved at Yi Qian, who had stopped in his tracks. "Why are you still standing there? I'll send you back." "Little girl, you even know about the automobile soldiers. Don't tell me you've learned all the ways to contact each other in the army?" Yi Qian instinctively wanted to reject this elegant yet dangerous man, but when she saw his half-smile as if he knew everything, she sighed softly and walked over with a natural expression. She opened the door to the front passenger seat and got into the car with a light step. When she smiled at him, her expression was open and honest. This made Xia Jinyuan laugh. "You really don't know, or are you pretending not to know? Or are you deliberately pretending not to know? This little girl is so calm. I don't believe that she doesn't know why I'm here. I don't know. Since Captain Xia especially came to look for me, it must be something important." Yi Qian curved his lips and revealed a faint smile. If Captain Xia didn't tell me, then I really wouldn't know. His thin lips were originally just a faint smile, but this time his smile deepened. His handsome face was as clear as the moon as he said lazily, "Student Yiqian, your attitude is very bad. You're asking the obvious. I think that there are some things that only one needs to know. I don't need to guess what others think." Yiqian smiled faintly. Even under the cold military aura, he was calm and composed. "If the enemy doesn't move, I won't move. Isn't this the law of war?" In just one night, this little girl had improved too quickly. She even knew how to talk to him about the law of war. Xia Jinyuan smiled and glanced at her as he drove. "Where did you put it? This thing is dangerous. Moreover, you are not qualified to control it now, and you do not have the qualifications to own it. Although your intentions are good, it's better to leave it to us for safekeeping. It's in the dormitory. I didn't bring it." Since he had already put it this way, there was no need for her to pretend to be deaf and mute. She generously admitted, "I didn't touch it. I kept it well and waited for you to come and get it." He was right. Without a proper identity, it would be futile even if he possessed her. Uncle Jen and Principal Chen had taught her well, but she was not someone who would willingly break the law. Moreover, she really didn't care about that gun. He returned to the dormitory and took out a pistol from the bottom of the shoe cabinet. He returned in less than 3 minutes. The car was parked outside. It turned out that Xia Jinyuan, who was sitting in the car, was talking to Principal Chen. Under the setting sun, the tall and handsome man smiled slightly. He nodded slightly to Principal Chen, who had said something, and said, "Then we'll be back tomorrow afternoon." Chapter 80. Go to the city to buy a few sets of test papers? If not tonight, come back tomorrow afternoon? That was making a mountain out of a molehill. Most importantly, she did not want to travel with Xia Jinyuan at all. She was rejecting him wholeheartedly. How could the perceptive Xia Jinyuan not notice? However, going to the city was unavoidable. He had to take her to the Public Security Bureau to identify her. Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. The smile on his face was a little reckless. "I started driving when I was 11 years old. It's been 9 years since then. So you can rest assured." When he spoke to Principal Chen, his carefree attitude disappeared and was replaced by a serious expression. "Uncle Chen, don't worry. I promise to send you back safely tomorrow afternoon." Yiqian was still in a daze even after the car had driven dozens of kilometers. She sat there with a cold expression and did not even look at him. Xia Jinyuan was not angry. Instead, he glanced at her from time to time. Xia Jinyuan waited until the car drove out of the winding national highway in the mountains and got on the highway to the city. He then said slowly, "It seems that I have offended you again. Your little face is as tense as a bullet." "I'm not angry. I just don't want to talk to you." Yiqian rubbed his eyebrows and leaned against the pillow. He said indifferently, "I gave you the gun. Why do you have to make me go to the city? Moreover, you didn't ask for my permission before this." So that was the reason. Xia Jinyuan smiled and apologized to her. "I did need to take you to the city. I'm really sorry for not telling you in advance. But, Captain Xia, I don't like someone making decisions for me when I don't know anything." Yiqian interrupted him rudely. He turned his head and looked at him coldly. "I really don't like it." At this moment, Xia Jinyuan realized that he had stepped on this girl's minefield. The smile on Junyan's face faded slightly. When he spoke again, his clear voice was filled with absolute respect for Yiqian. "I'm very sorry, Yiqian. I only cared about considering things from my own perspective and did not consider your feelings. That's right, I can't look at this little girl as if she's a minor. I have to treat her as an adult. About the pistol, I still need you to go back to the Public Security Bureau with me. Don't worry, you won't be implicated. If the Public Security Bureau wants to know where the pistol went, they need a record. The Municipal Public Security Bureau only gave me 24 hours, so I have to take you back tonight," Xia Jinyuan said seriously, explaining the whole thing very thoroughly. And his apology and respect made Yiqian understand his position. Although his expression was still cold, at least they could continue the conversation normally. "I also need to apologize. I should have handed it over in time." Yiqian was not an unreasonable person. On the contrary, she had a very clear personality. Actually, when she heard that he had to go to the city, she had already guessed something. The coldness she displayed was only to let the other party know what her persistence and her principles were. Her predecessor had suffered a loss because of her lack of persistence, so she had been defeated her whole life. In this life, she had to let everyone who knew her know that she had her own persistence and principles. No one could change her. Chapter 81. They set off at 6 in the evening and didn't enter the city until 11 at night. Xia Jinyuan looked at the city's night sky. There were flashes of lightning in the clouds at the end of the sky. It seemed that there would be a heavy rainstorm in the sky. He didn't wake up Yi Qian, who had already slept for a few hours. He smiled and drove into the gas station. When the car stopped, Yi Qian woke up with a start. His eyes were clear and there was no hint of drowsiness in them. This was a sign of alertness. The moment he opened his eyes, his mind was absolutely awake. Looking at the flashing clouds in the sky, Yi Qian frowned and said, "There's going to be a storm. How long until we get to the police station?" "We'll be there in 20 minutes. The bathroom is in front and the convenience store is next door." After turning off the engine, Xia Jinyuan took out his wallet and handed it to Yi Qian. "We need something to fill our stomachs. The police station is famous for being stingy. We won't even get a meal when we get there." He was indeed hungry. Yi Qian took the black wallet that still had his body temperature and went to the convenience store. He bought 2 bottles of milk and 2 packets of wafers and walked out with the bags. In front of her, a man and a woman pushed the door open, talking and laughing. Yi Jian had already retreated to the side, but the man who was flirting with the woman did not avoid her at all. His shoulder directly bumped into Yi Jian. A faint smell of gunpowder wafted over. Yi Qian saw a small black handle in the man's flipped sports jacket. It was a Ruger KP-94 handgun made of stainless steel and fired 9x19mm bullets. Yi Qian could tell what kind of gun it was just by looking at the handle. The unique characteristic of the gun was that its parts, from the sleeve, barrel, handle and socket holder, to the small parts inside, were all made of stainless steel. Illegal gun possession. Yi Qian couldn't help but take a second look. As soon as they walked out of the convenience store, a flash of lightning appeared in the sky, followed by a sudden clap of thunder. The power of nature instantly shook people's hearts. The torrential rain fell without warning. Pa, the sound of the rain hitting the ground could be heard. In the blink of an eye, the entire city was shrouded in a curtain of rain. When Yi Qian returned to the car, he whispered to Xia Jinyuan, who had gotten into the car after him, "I met a man and a woman in the convenience store just now. The man had a Ruger KP-94. I've memorized his appearance. Do you have a pen and paper? I can draw him for you to see." After a pause, he continued, "The man looks a little similar to Brother Fei. The only difference is that he's a little younger. The way he speaks doesn't sound like a Chinese. Instead, he sounds like he grew up overseas." Xia Jinyuan, who was about to start the car, took out a pen from his pocket. Then he turned around and easily picked up the plastic bag on the back seat. He took out a book from the bag and flipped to the last page. He pointed at a blank page and said in a deep voice, "Draw it and show it to me." His slightly cold voice sounded even colder and fiercer in the sound of the rain. Brother Fei has always had contacts overseas, but they haven't been able to break through yet. Short hair, a scar on the left ear. Yi Qian took the pen and started drawing on the blank page. He first drew the characteristics, then the facial features. Next, he noted the height, approximate height, what kind of clothes they wore, what kind of shoes they wore, and even the color of their socks. In the convenience store, after the man with the strange accent asked some questions, he bought 2 packs of cigarettes and walked out with a sexy woman in his arms. He didn't immediately get into the car. Instead, he looked at the sudden torrential rain and a trace of malice flashed across his face. Chapter 82. The portrait of the man was finished. Xia Jinyuan glanced at it and his handsome face instantly turned as cold as a sword. He glanced at the empty gas station and pursed his lips as he said to Yi Qian, "We need to go on an adventure. Do you want to prepare yourself?" Don't worry about me. I can still protect myself." Yi Qian closed the book and put it aside without even looking at what book it was. He picked up the second book. This time he saw it clearly. It was a book about war and soldiers. Why would he read such an entry-level military book? As this thought flashed through his mind, he quickly started drawing the woman's facial features. The car had already driven into the heavy rain. In order to catch up with the imported car, the car sped up instantly. The momentum was so strong that Yi Jian's entire body fell in front of the windshield. However, the pen in her hand was steady. Not a single stroke was out of place. After the woman's portrait was finished, Xia Jinyuan removed a communication device from the roof of the car. He drove with one hand and pressed a special contact number. After the call is connected, get them to contact the city's transportation team. Have them monitor all electronic devices in the city. At a sharp turn, Xia Jinyuan handed the communication device with a flashing red light to Yi Qian. "Make it short. Just say what you want to say." A few seconds later, the flashing red light turned green and a capable voice answered. Yi Qian heard Xia Jinyuan say something like, Q King. The voice of the person on the phone suddenly became very serious. J7 Roger. Dongfeng North Road, BMW U67689. 2 suspects have been found. Transportation team assistance. Target locked. A cold female voice replaced Xia Jinyuan's voice. The person on the other end of the communication device immediately knew that there was someone else in Q King's car. And it was a girl. Xia Jinyuan didn't pay attention to her. The car made 2 turns and caught up with the imported BMW, which was also speeding through the rain. The heavy rain obstructed the view and also increased the risk factor. If the car was too fast, it was very likely that it would slip and roll over. At this time, Yi Qian could only trust the driver. Yi Qian took the pistol out of the compartment and said to Xia Jinyuan, who was focused on driving, "There are no cars on the road. If we follow closely, there is a high chance that we will be discovered. It would be best if we could destroy the wheels." How confident are you? Obviously, he had listened to her suggestion, but he wasn't sure if she was confident or not. Yi Qian loaded the gun and raised it. He narrowed his eyes and took aim. His lips curled into a smile as he said, "The gun is a little old, but the accuracy is not bad. As for the confidence, even if it's not 100%, it's at least 99%. No, I need to be 100% confident." Xia Jinyuan said coldly and stepped on the accelerator again. The sound of the motor increased, and even the thunder in front of them did not slow down the speed of the car. Fortunately, it was a military jeep. Although it looked no different from an ordinary car, its performance was excellent. When they reached the next intersection, the imported BMW suddenly turned left and rushed onto another road. J7's voice came from the communication device. "The target car has been locked. It is now entering Princess Road. Q King, please note that there are factories under construction north of Princess Road. There are no surveillance devices at the moment." They needed to force the imported BMW onto another road. They definitely couldn't go north of Princess Road. Yi Qian looked at the road sign that flashed by. His delicate lips pursed and his eyes darkened. "It's too late. We have already entered Princess Road. The target has been discovered." Chapter 83. Whether or not they were discovered was secondary. The most important thing was that they had to apprehend the suspect in the car. Regardless of whether he was Fei Ji's overseas contact or not, he still had to be arrested for illegally carrying a gun. North of Princess Road was an area that had been redeveloped in the city over the past 2 years. It was also an electronic industrial zone. Not only were many buildings still under construction, but some residential areas were also under construction. The only fortunate thing was that there were few people and it was raining in the middle of the night, so the possibility of endangering the safety of the people was much lower. They didn't have a map, not even a planning map, so it would undoubtedly affect the arrest. Xia Jinyuan wasn't very familiar with the traffic in the city and relied on the help of the traffic brigade. Yi Qian didn't pay attention to the road ahead. Instead, she stared at the road signs on both sides of the road. The speed of the car and the torrential rain didn't affect her. In the blink of an eye, she had already accurately reported the road sign that she had just seen clearly. Princess Road North Avenue, Huanzhong intersection. The road sign standing in the heavy rain was at least 500 meters away from them. In the blink of an eye, Yi Qian accurately reported the location. 5 kilometers, Chuyuan intersection. Right, Chuli Road is Broken Head Road. Both sides are flattened bases. As J7's report came through the communication device, Xia Jinyuan, who was tailing the suspect's car, accelerated to 250 kilometers per hour. The entire car was like an arrow released from a bow, rushing out in the rain with a fierce momentum. Yi Qian, who was still fearless, gripped the communication device tightly. Her clear and childish voice contained a calmness that shouldn't be present at 14 years old. She said calmly, "Please dictate all the traffic plans north of Princess Road." Xia Jinyuan glanced at her from the corner of his eye. This girl wants to draw a map in her mind. If it were someone else, Xia Jinyuan would definitely smile faintly and not take it to heart. But for Yi Jian, even though she was only 14 years old, her calm demeanor that was as deep as water and as clear as water made people think that there was nothing that could stop her. This girl had a coldness that surpassed her peers. She wasn't impulsive, only calm and indifferent. Her splendor that was like water and mountain was already eye-catching enough to make people look up to her. As J7 spoke, Yi Qian's brain worked like a high-speed computer. What she needed, as well as what Xia Jinyuan needed, appeared in her mind. A map. The speed of the BMW is 256, the distance is 800 meters. Increase the speed to 280. We can catch up in 2 minutes. Not only did a map appear in his mind, but he also calculated accurately in his mind and reported a set of data. In 5 minutes, speed 280 km per hour and forced the other party into Tsuli Road. What did Yi Qian do the most in his previous life? He was running away. The only way to escape safely was to memorize every street in every place. How could carrying a computer be more convenient than carrying one's own brain? She had to familiarize herself with the streets, exits, and small paths once she was in a place. Her many years of habit had finally become the capital she relied on to survive. It had also become an ability that ordinary people could not compare to. Xia Jinyuan's immature voice was firm and confident. Xia Jinyuan's choice was to trust him. Remember, Yi Qian. I need you to be 100% sure. Xia Jinyuan reiterated again and began to increase the speed of the car. Chapter 84. The maximum speed of the modified military jeep was 290 km per hour. If it reached 280 km per hour, the slightest problem at the front would cause the entire car to overturn. The corners of Yi Jian's lips curled up slightly as she said indifferently, 100% confident. If you believe in it, then I believe in it. Her indifferent voice was still calm, and even a little indifferent and lazy. She was really not afraid. Facing the possibility of death, she would face it calmly. Xia Jinyuan's lips curled up, and his dark eyes were full of admiration for her. This little girl is really not bad. Old Master Zhen and Uncle Chen had put in so much effort to cultivate her. Their foresight was indeed unique. A piece of unpolished jade had already been polished to the luster that a piece of fine jade should have. There was no need to doubt whether this little girl could make a name for herself. He absolutely believed that she would succeed in the future. 256 km per hour, 260 km per hour, 270 km per hour. Yi Qian stared at the changing speed on the dashboard and tacitly agreed that it had reached 60 seconds. Under Xia Jinyuan's calm gaze, the distance between the car and the speeding BMW narrowed. In the BMW, the sexy girl turned her head to look at the jeep that was about to run parallel to them. There was no fear on her beautiful face. Instead, she giggled and said to the man driving, "Jason, they've caught up. It looks like they won't let go." I couldn't ask for more. The man laughed out loud and his cold face was filled with madness. They actually lost so many people in such a small place. If I don't teach them a lesson, how can I quench my anger? The girl's laughter grew louder. Her hand with bright red nail polish gently stroked Jason's thin face. There was a trace of coldness in her beautiful eyes, like that of a venomous snake. Jason quickly glanced to his left, gritted his teeth and cursed, "Damn it!" Without slowing down, he made a sharp right turn and rushed into Chuyuan Road. The tires screeched against the ground and water splashed everywhere. Under the high pressure, the water was compressed into mist, instantly blurring the line of sight of the cars behind. The two cars sped up to the highest speed on the empty road. They were both ruthless and willing to risk their lives. Yi Jian loosened the safety buckle on the front passenger seat and bent over to the back seat. She looked like a soldier who had calmly walked onto the battlefield. She was counting softly with a cold expression on her face. 1, 2, 3. The car window was lowered and the rain poured into the car. In a second, Yi Qian's face and hair were all wet. With a cold expression, she stuck a loaded pistol out of the car window. At the same time, Xia Jinyuan accelerated to 290 km per hour and rushed in from the right side of the BMW. This was the second time the two of them had worked together. With the prior communication and the trust they had built, the tacit understanding throughout the entire process was as natural as flowing clouds and flowing water. Yi Qian aimed at the BMW's rear wheel. Her dark eyes were filled with cold tears. The speed of the car, the impact of the wind, the impact of the drag. The string of numbers flashed through her mind like jumping cymbals. Then she fired without hesitation. Compared to the sound of thunder and torrential rain, the sound of gunfire seemed insignificant. After a bang, sparks flew everywhere. The BMW, whose tires had been shot, lost control and flipped to one side. It made an ear-piercing sound of metal rubbing against each other as it spun toward the construction site on the right side of Chuyuan Road. Chapter 85. Jason and the beautiful woman in the car had never imagined that they would be forced to stop in such a way. After the car flipped over, it spun like a top and rushed to the side of the road. At this time, the high-performance car reflected the value of the price. The airbags popped out and surrounded the two people. Even if the sky and earth were turned upside down, at least their brains were not damaged. Moreover, the car was going straight towards the foundation of the car. In the heavy rain, the foundation of the soil had become exceptionally soft, which obstructed the strong spinning force and protected the people in the car. The reason Yi Qian climbed to the back was because the two of them agreed that when the right side of the car was hit, the driver would quickly do something that would benefit him if there was no way to turn the steering wheel towards his left side. Reality proved that this was indeed the case. Behind the car was a scene of sparks flying everywhere but inside the car. Yi Qian closed the car window again, put away his pistol and wiped the rain off his face. Qing Yan's face lit up with a faint smile. Done, I'm 100% sure. She wouldn't gamble on anything that wasn't 100% certain. Gambling was something that needed to be judged according to the situation. Why should she gamble on something like this, which was completely dependent on her ability? Xia Jinyuan, who had already stepped on the brakes, turned the car around and returned to the scene after the car had traveled 200 meters due to inertia. Hearing this, she raised her clear voice and said happily, "Well done. It was so beautiful that it was impeccable." The car stopped in the heavy rain. Xia Jinyuan didn't immediately get out of the car to check. Instead, he said to Yi Qian, "With your ability to adapt, it shouldn't be too difficult for you to drive." If anything happened, she could still drive away immediately. As a soldier, Xia Jinyuan was used to arranging an escape route. As Yi Qian raised his eyebrows slightly, he had already started explaining how to start the car and how to drive. Refuel, brake, one to go, the other to stop. You can control the steering wheel yourself. Turn left, turn right. Listening to his explanation, Yi Jian sighed softly in her heart. She thought to herself, this is probably the most irresponsible driving instructor in the world. It's obvious that he's leaving the students to fend for themselves. You mean you get out of the car and I'll watch from the parking lot? Yi Qian sat there patiently while looking out the window. However, he didn't intend to let him go. He looked at him with a faint smile and said, I don't think this behavior is out of responsibility for my safety. Captain Xia, we have fought together twice. We can't be considered comrades, but we can still be considered partners. Yi Qian did not say anything else. He believed that with his intelligence he would definitely understand what he was trying to say. How could he not understand? He had experienced how poisonous the little girl's mouth was. However, when it came to such matters, Xia Jinyuan kept the faint smile at the corner of his lips and spoke in a cold tone as if he was speaking to his own soldiers. Yi Qian, I order you to stay put and wait for further orders. Apart from being a business partner, you are also a student. Even though I have seen your ability and strength, I am a soldier. You are a soldier and you are a student. Soldiers protect the country, and the meaning of home is you, your family, your friends. This is my duty, and it is also our principle as a soldier. Chapter 86. What was a soldier? Soldiers were the cornerstone of a country. They were born in peace, but they could die in war. When the horn was blown and the war song was played, they who guarded the country would definitely be at the forefront. Soldiers were the most intimidating and lethal people in a country. They were worthy of dying for the sake of war. Even if they died for the people, their souls would still be there. Yi Qian looked at Xia Jinyuan, whose gaze was cold and hard, but who used his life to explain what a soldier was. The faint smile on her face gradually disappeared. It was no longer casual but filled with respect. He nodded his head lightly and only said one word, okay. It was a promise and also a guarantee. Good girl? Xia Jinyuan stretched out his hand and smiled. Stay here. I'll be back soon. Also, call the ambulance. After he finished speaking, he opened the car door, got out of the car with a cold gaze, and walked into the torrential rain. His tall and slender figure was as imposing as a mountain. With the indomitable spirit of a soldier, he walked toward the overturned BMW. Yi Jian quietly looked at the back view that was as majestic as a mountain. She hummed softly, You won't know me in the age of white pigeons flying. My name isn't as prominent as the stars. In the days when the smoke of war is gone, you won't pay attention to me. My story will be drowned out by the song. In the most dangerous times, there was always a group of people who rushed to the front and shielded you from the wind and rain. Major Xia Jinyuan, who had rushed into the rain, was one of the members of that group. After dialing 120 for the ambulance, Yi Qian, who stayed in the car, felt that time was passing very slowly. He was suffering. He quietly looked outside and watched Xia Jinyuan, who was bending over to check the situation inside the car with a flashlight. The rain had already soaked him, but it didn't affect his cautious actions. After checking, he climbed to the car door that was facing the sky. After a while, Yi Qian saw him open the door. Seeing this, Yi Qian was already frightened. He knew that Xia Jinyuan would definitely check carefully before opening the door, but he still couldn't help but worry. Without hesitation, he opened the car door and rushed out in the heavy rain. She just walked over and stood behind the car. She raised her head and didn't even blink when the rain poured into her eyes. Her dark eyes looked at the man standing on top of the platform, who was as imposing as a god. She said softly, "The relationship between the people and the people is as thick as water. Comrade soldier, occasionally as civilians we can also be your backing. Isn't that right? At the very least she would stand here and watch for him. Once there was danger, he would rush forward without hesitation. Protecting us is your unshirkable responsibility. Then please allow me to contribute my meager strength to you." The girl's voice was not loud. It was clearly as light as dripping water, but it carried a power that could penetrate stone, allowing him to clearly hear every word she said. Those clear and calm eyes quietly looked at him. In her eyes he had already seen the most beautiful scenery in the world. His thin lips slightly raised, Xia Jinyuan smiled and said, "You're a very stubborn partner. I really have no reason to reject you." The first person to be dragged out was the beautiful woman who had fainted. In her hand she was holding a delicate and small pistol, which was obviously specially made in the military factory. The gun was confiscated, the bullets were removed, and the person was dragged to the side. Yi Qian, who was standing in front of the car, shone his flashlight so that Xia Jinyuan, who had already entered the car, could easily drag out the other suspect. Seeing that the unconscious man was about to be dragged out, Yi Qian suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Chapter 87. Seeing that the unconscious man was about to be dragged out, Yi Qian suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Inside the car, Xia Jinyuan shouted in a deep voice, "Get out of the way!" Yi Jian, who had sensed the impending danger, arched her body and leaped forward like a nimble cat when she heard his shout. The glamorous woman, who had thought that it would be easy to sneak up on a little girl, was visibly surprised. She let out a soft, "Eh?" Without pausing, she raised her leg and kicked Yi Qian again. In the thick yellow mud, Yi Jian nimbly flipped over twice in a row and was already squatting on the ground. Like a cheetah, she looked coldly at the beautiful woman who had ambushed her twice in a row. He shone the flashlight directly at the woman's face and turned on the strong light mode. In the blink of an eye, Yi Jianting jumped up with a cold look in his eyes. He attacked the beautiful woman who was holding an extremely thin silver wire in her hand. Inside the car, Xia Jinyuan, who had just heaved a sigh of relief, saw that Yi Qian had actually taken the initiative to attack. His heartstrings tightened again. He didn't know if she could handle the suspect. He was still dragging the other suspect, so he let go without hesitation. He bent his body and retreated outside, intending to help Yi Qian. It turned out that the unconscious Jason had opened his eyes groggily after being dragged, pulled, and let go. They weren't injured, but they had fainted due to the lack of oxygen in the high-speed rotation. Now that he had woken up, his first instinct was to pull out his gun and shoot at the side of the car door. Xia Jinyuan saw Yi Qian fighting outside. Seeing that she was fierce, he relaxed slightly and punched the man who was still trying to pull out his gun. His fist landed on the man's nose, easily causing him to bleed. The car flipped sideways. The fight between the two adult men in the car caused the whole car to shake. With a bang, the car fell and flipped back. The tremor made Yi Jian feel as if the entire ground was trembling. She didn't look back, but focused on dealing with the glamorous woman who was holding an extremely tough silver wire. In the army she had fought with soldiers before, but this was the first time she had fought with criminals. She wasn't afraid, only slightly excited. The restless fighting spirit in her body became restless, and it struggled even more with Yi Qian's punches. Standing in the rainy night, Yi Qian, who hadn't even had her period, was no different from a child in the eyes of the other party. There was no need to be afraid of her. The glamorous woman flipped the wet hair on her forehead and smiled coquettishly. "Little girl, why aren't you properly in school? Why are you joining the fight with a soldier? I'm not your teacher. Little girl, you're really unlucky to have met me." As she spoke, she narrowed her eyes slightly, and a trace of coldness flowed out from the corners of her eyes. The silver wire in her hand, which was made of a special material and was usually used as a hairband, was gently pulled between her two hands. Yi Qian seemed to hear the zheng-zheng sound of the silver wire. The corners of Yi Qian's mouth curled up slightly. Although he was small, his aura was not small. He smiled coldly and said, "Sister, you're old and I happen to be the kind of person who doesn't want to respect old people. So, you're really unlucky to have met me." Chapter 88. It was raining heavily, and under the dim yellow light of the street lamps, the woman in front of him still had to tidy up her messy hair from time to time. It was obvious that she paid a lot of attention to her image. Usually, people like her had a common problem. They were only allowed to call her young but not old. Calling her old was like stepping on a landmine, it would explode with one step. As expected, the woman's expression immediately twisted when she heard that. Her delicate makeup was washed away by the rain, and her expression was so twisted. She really wasn't a young woman. Little girl, you're asking for it. The woman took a step forward with her long legs, pulled the silver wire in her hand, and wrapped it around Yi Qian's neck. She wanted to use the shortest time possible to get rid of this silly little girl who mocked her for being old. This was a woman who was used to killing people and had no sense of guilt. Her indifference to human life could be seen from her twisted expression. Little did she know that this silly little girl was a thorn that couldn't be touched. Yi Qian calmed down slightly. His gaze swept past the silver wire in the woman's hand that could be wrapped around his neck at any time. The moment she rushed over, he kicked the woman's thigh fiercely. Then, using her big foot as a support point, she stepped on the other party's leg and soared into the air. Using her right knee, she fiercely hit the girl's chin with a majestic force. His agile body spun like a swallow, then landed nimbly on the ground. The moment he appeared, he dealt a heavy blow to his opponent. If Xia Jinyuan didn't want to capture Jason alive, he would have clapped his hands and cheered. The beautiful woman was hit by Yi Qian on the spot. Her chin hurt as if her bones were fractured, and she saw stars in front of her eyes. Damn it! I'm going to kill you today. Knowing that she had underestimated her opponent, the woman covered her chin and spat out a mouthful of bloody phlegm. She looked at Yi Qian warily and took off her tight denim jacket. Yi Qian was someone who wasn't afraid of threats. He wasn't afraid in his previous life, and he definitely wouldn't be afraid in this life. Hearing this, her delicate lips curved slightly. I don't think there's a chance that you can kill me. If you don't believe me, you can try. He purposely added a hint of provocation in his words. His gaze was locked on the silver wire in the other party's hand that occasionally flashed with a cold light under the street lamp. Her gaze was heavy and cold, and the rain-stained face of Ming Yan contained a ruthlessness that did not match her age. When the girl, who was originally extremely confident, met her gaze, it made her heart tremble for no reason. If we can win, then we don't have to give them a chance to rebuild their confidence. While Uncle Jin's words echoed in his mind, Yi Qian, who had seen clearly and remembered how his opponent nimbly pulled the silver thread in his hand, was like a cheetah in its first battle. It flashed its sharp claws and attacked again. Although it was his first battle, he had trained with the elite soldiers in the army. Perhaps it was because she had been tainted with the ruthlessness of a soldier in battle, but her clear eyes were also filled with ruthlessness. The best defense was an offense. If she was confident that she could win, then she had to win beautifully. Next to them, Xia Jinyuan, who had just finished the fight, knocked out the suspect and tied him up with clothes. Then he looked at the ruthless girl with interest. She was like a little cheetah, beating her enemy until he was in a sorry state. The beautiful woman had gone from her initial arrogance to fighting back in a sorry state. The thin silver wire in her hand had always been her life-saving and killing weapon, but this time it was useless. There were a few times when she almost injured her hands. Chapter 89. The girl's punching routine was Sanda, which was integrated into the Japanese Taekwondo routine. Therefore she used more kicks than punches. Even Yi Qian couldn't bear to end such a rare battle. Grandpa Jen once said that theory and actual combat were indispensable. Sometimes, a powerful battle was better than understanding countless theory books. Xia Jinyuan could tell that she had intentionally prolonged the battle at the end so that she could use all the techniques she had learned on her opponent. A smart girl always had a smart way of doing things. That student over there, don't treat people like cats. Don't forget, we still have serious business to attend to. He laughed and raised his voice. He also wanted her to have more actual combat experience, but time was a little tight. He still had to send her back to school tomorrow. The girl was still growing. She got wet, she might get sick. One was fighting with ease while the other was watching from the sidelines. The girl, who was already at a disadvantage, became even more flustered. Faced with this little girl who was clearly still a child, but had such a ruthless gaze, she couldn't help but feel a trace of uncertainty when she kicked. Her long legs swept over again. It looked like she had already dodged Yi Qian. Ming Yan's face lifted slightly, but there was a sinister smile. She said to the girl, "Sorry, your leg is quite powerful. I'm sure you can escape quickly." She smiled slightly, but her words were filled with bloodthirst. "So, I have to destroy it." Her smile faintly contained a hint of bloodthirst. The girl, whose heart couldn't help but tremble, sensed the approaching danger. In her panic, she actually tried to retract her long leg. How could she possibly give her the chance to escape? Yi Qian's dark eyes were cold. He moved as fast as lightning, his right hand grabbing the girl's ankle. Amidst the girl's scream, Yi Qian's left hand formed into a palm. Holding rainwater, he viciously and fiercely struck her knee. As a person who had experienced life and death, Yi Qian, who had seen through life and death, couldn't possibly have the heart of a saint, no matter how young his body was. Or rather, it was laughably compassionate. In front of her was a criminal who was indifferent to human life and said that he wanted to kill. How could she show mercy to a criminal? Amidst the girl's shrill screams, Yi Jian, with a cold expression, grabbed both of her hands and clasped them behind her back. She then picked up the denim shirt that the girl had thrown aside and tied it up beautifully. "Little girl, you've learned quite a lot. Come, tell me, is there anything you don't know?" Xia Jinyuan looked at Yi Qian, who even tied a knot like a professional. While admiring him, he also thought, his talent is amazing. In less than a month's time, he had undergone an astonishing transformation, as if he had been reborn. With a smile, Yi Qian let go of the girl who was still screaming in pain. She clapped her hands and said indifferently, "There's one more thing." She paused intentionally, and there was a hint of ruthlessness in her smile. "I don't know how to kill." The smile on Xia Jinyuan's thin lips faded slightly. Then, with a hint of heaviness in his voice, he sighed softly and said, "If possible, no one wants to learn how to kill. Little girl, you. But as long as I walk down the path that Captain Xia once walked, I think learning how to kill is only a matter of time." Compared to the heaviness in his voice, Yi Qian was clearly much more relaxed. Chapter 90. The reason why she was so relaxed was because she had come to terms with her past and knew what her goal was. Yi Qian looked up and smiled. "What's there to be afraid of, even if my hands are stained red with blood, if I kill to protect the peace of the country?" Principal Chen and Master Zhen had always taught her that, in order to protect the peace of the country, and to protect the dignity of the country, even if her hands were stained with blood and she became the target of the enemy, what was there to be afraid of? Xia Jinyuan, who did not speak immediately, patted her shoulder gently. He stared at her with his deep dark eyes and said word by word, "Student Ji, remember what you said tonight. When you have a legal gun license, I look forward to fighting alongside you again." Because he said that she did not have a legal gun license, she did not shoot the suspect in the dangerous fight just now, even though she had the opportunity to shoot him dead. From this, he could tell that this was a girl who could restrain herself and had light in her heart. He was worried that the murderous intent in her heart was too strong, but after hearing her words, he immediately felt relieved. "I'll get the police car and ambulance to stop at the intersection. Get in the car first, I'll take care of things here." Xia Jinyuan looked at Yi Qian worriedly. Not only was he soaked, but he was also covered in mud. His dark eyes flickered. "Don't go to the Public Security Bureau for now. Go to the reception center to wash up first." Yi Qian raised his arm and looked down at himself. He smiled and said, "The first time I met Principal Chen, I stood in the rain for almost an hour during the first class." In other words, this was not a big deal. She was not as delicate as the girls in the capital, nor as arrogant as the girls in the city. Instead, she had the pride to endure hardships, a beautiful heart, and a pair of bright eyes that could see through the vanity of the world. It was a pleasure to talk to such a girl. Sitting in the car, Yi Qian looked at Xia Jinyuan, who was still standing in the rain and talking to the soldiers. His majestic back subconsciously fell into her heart. Although she did not want to interact with such a dangerous and charismatic man, she had to admit that he was a very outstanding soldier. When they arrived at the reception center, Xia Jinyuan directly took a set of short sleeves and shorts for female soldiers from the front desk and handed them to Yi Qian along with the room card. "Room 306. I'm 307. If you need anything, feel free to contact me." The two of them were only separated by a wall. Yi Jian entered the shower and stood under the shower head. She closed her eyes and looked up. Immediately, there was muddy yellow water under her feet. After showering for at least half an hour, Yi Jian walked out of the shower. "Xia Jinyuan. Xia Jinyuan." Yi Jian, whose hair had not even dried, immediately opened the door. "Aren't you going to rest? I'm here to give you this." He raised his hand and a pair of white sneakers fell into Yi Qian's eyes. "You definitely can't wear your shoes tomorrow. I just bought them. See if they fit." Not only did he have shoes, he even prepared socks. Xia Jinyuan did not know if they fit. He lowered his gaze and looked at Yi Qian's feet. After a glance, his Adam's apple moved slightly. He immediately looked up and quickly stuffed the shoes and socks into Yi Qian's hands. This little girl's feet are really beautiful. Her skin was so fair that it was like a pink pearl. Stop, what are you thinking? Chapter 91. Major Xia, who had always kept a low profile, quickly hid the slight awkwardness in his eyes. There was no trace of abnormality on his elegant face. Go back to the room and try it on. If you want to change, there's still time. He lowered his gaze slightly again, but he didn't dare to look directly at Yi Qian's beautiful bare feet. Instead, he looked at her fair and slender calf. His thin lips were already pursed tightly. Her skin was extremely fair and had a milky, porcelain-like luster. It was so delicate that it seemed as though a slight pressure could leave a scar on it. But now there was a slight flaw in her fair skin. A bruise that was already purplish-black had appeared very conspicuously on her right calf. Xia Jinyuan glanced at it. His gaze froze and he suddenly bent down. Don't move. As Yi Qian stepped back, he said coldly, let me check if there's any bone damage. Not only was the bruise dark, but it was also very large. He didn't know how this little girl could endure it. His sudden action really stunned Yi Qian. She instinctively took a step back, but in the end his large hand grabbed her ankle and even ordered her not to move. Although she was only 14 in this lifetime, but in her previous lifetime she was at least 28. Yi Qian, who had never been in a relationship before and had her first kiss in both lifetimes, was stunned. She had never been held by a man before. Now that Major Xia's large hand had suddenly grabbed her ankle, even though Yi Qian, who had seen through life and death and was indifferent by nature, had a visible flush on her face. She had just taken a hot shower, so her skin was as white and delicate as a peeled egg. That gorgeous flush was like a blooming flower. It was so beautiful that it could take one's breath away. Fortunately, Major Xia's attention was focused on her injury, and he didn't notice anything else. The hand that held Yi Qian's ankle had slender fingers and his palm was burning hot. The skin that he was holding seemed to have a higher temperature, so hot that it made Yi Qian want to run away. No. Yi Qian finally calmed himself down, but he was once again stunned by his next action. He actually knelt down on one knee, his expression focused and serious as he checked his injured calf. Yi Qian's slender, jade-like fingers gently pressed on the wound, starting from the outside then moving to the middle. Yi Qian was so embarrassed that his whole body was tense. Xia Jinyuan was holding her ankle, so he knew her body's reaction very well. He knelt on one knee and checked her body. Amused, he said, "You're just a child. Why are you so nervous? I'm just checking for you." It would have been better if she hadn't said anything. The moment she did, Yi Qian felt his face burn even more. There's absolutely no way to do so. Can you just ignore it? This was the first time a man had held her ankle. She, who had never felt awkward before, really wanted to run away. "If you back off again, I don't mind carrying you to the bed to check." Xia Jinyuan looked up and glanced at her with a smile. A sentence that could cause misunderstandings slowly came out of his thin lips. Yi Qian. Major Xia, how could you say something like that in front of an adult like me? Are you trying to take liberties with me? Do you understand? Major Xia didn't understand. At the age of 14, it was as though her soul had been blessed. In 2 years she had skipped grades from middle school to high school. At the age of 16 she had gotten into the best military school with excellent grades and a grand slam in physical fitness. From then on she had mingled with men. Throughout the year she had seen more sows than women. Chapter 92. Major Xia didn't understand. At the age of 14, it was like a blessing to her soul. In 2 years she had skipped all the grades from junior high to senior high school. At the age of 16 she had gotten into the best military school with excellent results and a grand slam in physical fitness. From then on she had mingled with men. Throughout the year she had seen more sows than women. He said it jokingly without a trace of disrespect. It was as if he was casually facing Yi Qian. Yi Qian sighed softly in his heart. Dangerous men really should be kept away from. If he wasn't careful, he would be taken advantage of. She lowered her head and looked down as if she was looking down at him. She could see his clear forehead and his thick eyelashes that were even thicker than a woman's, and, under his elegant and tall nose, his thin lips that were sometimes sexy and sometimes fierce. When he spoke, his exquisite and elegant features were accompanied by a faint smile. He was so leisurely that it made people reluctant to end the conversation with him. When he held the gun, his gaze was sharp like a sword that could cut through the darkness. His enemies feared him. But as his comrades they felt safe and trusted him wholeheartedly. After sizing him up for a while, Yi Qian quietly looked away. Dangerous men must not be looked at for too long. The longer he looked at him, the more he felt that he was a rare commodity. He would admire him more and more. Girl, even if you can tolerate it, you shouldn't tolerate it like this. Xia Jinyuan was pressing his fingers around the bruise. He was already pursing his lips. One look and it was obvious that he was in a bad mood. A large area of soft tissue contusions and the bleeding under the skin is spreading. Don't you feel pain? You've been tolerating it until now? Whether it was his expression or his words, they all expressed his cold displeasure. The middle part is purplish-black and swollen. He pressed his thumb gently and immediately heard Yi Qian's soft gasp from above. He looked up and stared at her with his deep dark eyes. Go to the hospital for an X-ray. Be careful of fractures. Fractures? It wasn't that serious. No need, I know. Yi Qian politely refused with a smile. There are no fractures, but it does hurt a little. Okay, Major Xia's gaze was so cold that it could scratch her skin. She completely refused. Don't think about sleeping tonight. She, who had always known how to survive, immediately softened. She didn't want to be forceful and used a different method to reject him. Indeed, if Yi Qian insisted that he was fine, Xia Jinyuan would have carried him to the hospital without another word. Getting up, Junyan was still serious as he looked at the little girl who was so strong that it made people's heart ache. After a long time he smiled and said, Go back to the room and wait for me. I'll get the medicinal oil for you to rub. She didn't have parents who could shelter her from the wind and rain. She had to deal with everything by herself. That was probably why she was so strong. Perhaps it was because of the intense fight in the rainy night, but Yi Qian's cerebral cortex was still excited even after he finished applying the medicinal oil. Lying on the bed, Yi Qian closed his eyes and the scene of him fighting with the girl appeared in his mind. That silver thread was indeed a very good weapon for self-defense, but he didn't know where to get one. As he thought about it, he gradually fell asleep. At 7:30 in the morning, they finished their morning run and had breakfast together before driving to the Municipal Public Security Bureau. The car that was dirty last night had been cleaned and there was still a faint mint smell in it. It was Xia Jinyuan's mint smell. When we get there, you just have to say that you found it. You don't have to say anything else. I'll wait for you outside. Xia Jinyuan didn't forget to remind her again, but he wasn't worried that she would be afraid of anything. This little girl was very brave. Chapter 93. Xia Jinyuan looked at the carefree Yi Jian with a faint smile. She did not have any psychological burden at all. She did not have any psychological burden at all. Indeed, she did not have any psychological burden at all. She did not do anything bad, so why should she be afraid? Before entering the interrogation room, Yi Qian smiled at him and entered the interrogation room with a policewoman and a policewoman. Xia Jinyuan stood outside for about 3 minutes before heading to the bureau chief's office. The bureau chief warmly welcomed Xia Jinyuan and said, Young Master Xia, please take a seat. His tone was familiar and it was obvious that they had known each other for many years. After personally making him a cup of tea, Chief Lu sat down and said, Leader Xia personally called last night. I happened to mention that I saw young Master Xia at the bureau yesterday. Leader Xia smiled and asked young Master Xia to call him when you have time. The Bureau of Public Security was under the jurisdiction of the Provincial Public Security Bureau, and the Provincial Public Security Bureau was under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Public Security. Sorry to trouble you, Chief Lu. Xia Jinyuan took the tea that the director personally handed to him. He was born with dignity. Facing the director of the Municipal Public Security Bureau, he was still calm. He took a sip of tea and looked up at Chief Lu's smile. He smiled and said, There is one thing that I need you to do. He did not say please or trouble. His need was enough to express his attitude. He had to do it. When Chief Lu heard this, the smile on his face deepened. Young Master Xia, you are too polite. Haha, young Master Xia has been here for half a year, but this is the first time you need me to do something. Everyone knew that young Master Xia, who was in the military, was the most difficult person in the capital to do favors with. Ever since young Master Xia came to them, many people had been hoping that one day, young Master Xia would open his mouth and ask for something. Who would have thought that after half a year of silence, such a great opportunity would fall into his lap? After Xia Jinyuan finished speaking, Chief Lu laughed heartily. So that's what you want? No problem at all. I will go get it later. Young Master Xia, please prepare it for me. Okay, thank you, Chief Lu. Xia Jinyuan, who didn't like to be courteous, stood up when he saw that the matter was settled. I have to go and see that girl. She's still a middle school student and is timid. I'm going to give her some courage. He stood up and Chief Lu naturally had to send him off. However, Xia Jinyuan waved his hand, indicating that he would not allow others to refuse. But Junyan still smiled elegantly and said, I still know the way in the bureau. Director Liu, please continue with your work. He had never been a person who liked to be courteous. Director Liu had only come to find him after investigating. Otherwise, he would never have come if there was even the slightest problem. Calm. Calm. In less than 5 minutes, Director Liu had settled the matter. He did not let him send the girl off just now because he wanted him to deal with it as soon as possible, so that he could make it in time to give the girl a surprise. Thank you for your hard work. I'm very sorry. I did not think that something I did would cause trouble for you. Yi Qian was a sincere person. Whether it was her words or her expression, they could feel her sincerity. In this aspect she was very similar to Xia Jinyuan. After saying goodbye to the police, Yi Qian saw Xia Jinyuan, who was standing at the end of the corridor with a cold and arrogant aura. He quickened his pace and walked over. Chapter 94. Xia Jinyuan smiled as he looked at the girl walking towards him. His deep and dark eyes were filled with gentleness. Let's make a trip to the library. We should be back in town before 10. Seeing how she was still chatting and laughing as she said goodbye to the 2 police officers, he knew that this bold girl was not afraid at all. She did not panic like a commoner, nor did she break out in a cold sweat. Yi Qian had never been to the city library before. In her previous life she had only been to the city bus station. She smiled and said, it shouldn't be too far. I want to buy more materials. She wanted to bring back all the textbooks and test papers for the 3rd year of junior high school. 10 minutes. Xia Jinyuan took a file from Chief Liu and walked slowly and elegantly ahead of her. My personal chauffeur is here. Student Yi, you can give me your orders at any time. Personal chauffeur. Yi Qian thought to herself. She was afraid of causing public outrage if she let a major be her personal chauffeur. When they arrived at the library, Yi Qian went straight to the middle school revision area on the 3rd floor. She picked out 5 sets of relatively difficult 2nd-year comprehensive test papers. Next, she picked out the key knowledge for the 3rd year of junior high school and various test papers. Xia Jinyuan, who was standing next to her, wanted to give her some advice. However, when he saw her long and slender fingers swiping across the stack of test papers and comparing them, he knew that his advice was unnecessary. When Yi Qian picked up the 3rd-year revision questions, Xia Jinyuan was not surprised either. He raised his eyebrows slightly and the interest in his dark eyes intensified. Do you plan to finish all the revision this year? Xia Jinyuan asked with a smile as he came out of the library with all the materials and test papers. Do you plan to study a bunch of revision materials during the summer break? Yi Qian got into the car and turned to look at the huge stack of materials on the back seat. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly as she said casually, yes, I'll give it a try. If I can devote all my time to training in the 3rd year of junior high school. Xia Jinyuan, who was starting the car, paused for a few breaths. When he looked at her again, there was a hint of surprise in his dark eyes. The 3rd year of junior high school. You mean you plan to finish all the 2nd and 3rd year textbooks by yourself in the first half of the year? Although he started working hard when he was 14 and was admitted to military school at 16, he did not completely study on his own. I do have such a plan. At present it isn't a very difficult thing to do. I want to enter the provincial first high school. It's far from town. How could she waste her time? Yi Jian's arrangement for herself was almost harsh. What was hard work to her? How could she let down Grandpa Zhen and Principal Chen's painstaking efforts? Xia Jinyuan looked at her deeply. A pearl would always shine, and an unpolished jade would eventually become something useful. Her perseverance and patience were the foundation of her success. It would allow her to walk steadily to the peak of her life step by step. Work hard. Don't disappoint the efforts of the 2 seniors. If you can take each step steadily, it will be the greatest reward for them. Xia Jinyuan, who had already steadily driven the car to the city, spoke to Yi Jian in a gentle voice. Yi Jian was trying her best not to let him down and not to let her seniors down. Yi Qian nodded gently and picked up a set of test papers to read slowly. Chapter 95. Her jet-black hair cascaded down her shoulders, and her delicate profile was so serious that Xia Jinyuan couldn't bear to speak anymore. His gaze inadvertently slid past her beautiful swan-like neck, lingering on it for a few seconds before he calmly looked away. Yi Qian, who was already captivated by the questions, didn't notice his gaze. Her fair and slender fingers would occasionally lightly swipe across the test paper as she worked on the last difficult question. At around 10:20, Xia Jinyuan started to get busy. The communicator in the car would occasionally beep with the sound of someone reporting work. Yi Qian, who had already finished a test paper, saw this and decided to sleep in the back seat before they got on the highway so as not to disturb his work. Xia Jinyuan, who was at work, was calm and deep. His innate noble temperament was reflected in his every word and action, and he was born with the demeanor of a leader. Confidence, calmness, seriousness. Yi Qian learned a lot about the qualities a soldier should have from him. Perhaps because she only slept for 2 to 3 hours last night, Yi Qian felt like she was listening to a lullaby as she listened to Xia Jinyuan's steady and deep voice. She slowly closed her eyes, and didn't even know when she fell asleep. By the time she woke up, the car had already exited the highway and entered the national highway, heading towards town. It happened to be 3 in the afternoon when they arrived in Fujian town. Yi Qian didn't go back to school, but went straight to the recruit assembly camp. There were 2 language classes in the afternoon, and teacher Ku probably didn't want to see her. I've packed everything in this. Xia Jinyuan didn't drive the car into the camp, but parked it outside. He opened the trunk of the car and took out a bag with the words Xinhua Bookstore printed on it. Inside the bag were a few military books he bought yesterday. There are 4 books here that you can take a look at. They're all basic military knowledge. Yi Qian realized that the basic military books she saw in the car yesterday were actually for her. She didn't refuse and only hesitated for a moment before accepting them. She smiled and thanked him graciously. After his car drove out of her sight, Yi Qian looked at the books he gave her and sighed softly before walking back to the camp. After returning to the dorm, she placed her test papers on the bookshelf one by one. When she was about to organize the 4 books Xia Jinyuan gave her, she opened the bag and saw the file she saw in his hands at the Public Security Bureau. It was folded neatly and sandwiched between the books. Yi Qian. Her name was written forcefully on the portfolio. Her handwriting was just like her. Looking at it, one could feel a sense of coldness assaulting one's senses. Yi Jian's fingers gently pinched the file, and a dazzling light suddenly burst out from her starry eyes. Her little face instantly bloomed like a peach blossom, bright and dazzling. The silver wire. The wire. The wire. It was as if she couldn't wait to open it. She held the coiled silver wire in her hand and gently uncoiled it one by one. The front and back ends of the wire skillfully wrapped around her left and right hands. The cool touch seemed to seep into her heart. Just like last night, she let the silver wire coil around her hands. It was as if she was holding a living thing in her hands. She could do whatever she wanted. With a soft whoosh, the silver thread pierced through the air and tightly wrapped around the bed frame. When Yi Jian's bright eyes retracted the silver thread, they were overflowing with splendor and elegance. When they moved, they were like peaches and plums, and when they were still, they were like orchids in an empty valley. He actually gave it to her. He took it out of the Public Security Bureau and gave it to her. Chapter 96. But the surprise only lasted for a moment. Very quickly, the radiance on her beautiful face faded and Dai Qing's brows furrowed slightly. Was it really okay to just give it to her like this? No, she had to ask him. Otherwise, she would feel uneasy even if she accepted it. Since Battalion Commander Yang was not around, Yi Qian simply carried her backpack and went to the school to look for Principal Chen. Principal Chen should know. From the campsite to the national highway, Yi Qian did not slow down at all. She kept running. In front of her, in a white van, a middle-aged man who looked like a teacher and was dressed decently happened to see the running figure in the rearview mirror. He noticed that the girl, who looked like a student, was only about the same distance behind the van even after they had driven for several kilometers. He said to the driver, "Old Huang, how many kilometers per hour are you driving? The girl behind you can almost catch up to you." 60 kilometers per hour. Although Fujian town is lagging behind, there is still a lot of traffic. Don't think it's slow. Driver Huang explained with a smile. He could not see the running figure, so he did not understand why the middle-aged man was teasing him. When the middle-aged man heard this, he said to the 2 teachers sitting behind him in surprise, "Quick, look behind you. That girl has already run several kilometers behind the van. The distance is about the same as before. Her endurance is amazing." The 2 teachers with serious expressions pushed open the window and looked behind them. They were also surprised. She looks like a student. But Fujian Town Middle School is still in class. Student, skipping class? A female teacher in her 40s asked, "Principal Chow, why don't we stop the van? If she's a student, she can come with us. What do you think?" Yi Qian did not expect to be able to hitch a ride after running for so long. After she got into the van, Principal Chow looked at the girl who was only breathing slightly and teased her again. "Student, you jumped into the van so boldly. Aren't you afraid that we will take you away?" After he asked, the two teachers sitting with Yi Qian looked at her with smiles and waited for her answer with interest. "You don't smell like chalk dust, but you have black and red ink on your hands. There is also red ink on your thumb. Let me guess, you should be the principal," Yi Qian said with a smile. His words stunned Principal Chow. "You can tell what position it is from this?" "Of course. When I got on the car, this teacher even smiled politely at you. I can tell that she respects you very much." Why did he say that the middle-aged woman beside him was a teacher? The answer was obvious. She had the smell of chalk dust on her. Principal Chow was already laughing out loud. "Then I might also be the dean." Before he finished speaking, Principal Chow thought of something and laughed even louder. "There aren't many humorous deans in the dean's office. I say, student, your observation skills are pretty good." Since they had already guessed that he was the principal, there was no need to guess who Song Laosher and Zhu Laosher were. Actually, Yi Qian had not only guessed that he was the principal, he could also vaguely guess which school he was from. The person who came to Fujian Town Middle School at this time should be the principal of the provincial first high school. Principal Chen was already waiting at the school gate. When Yi Qian got out of the van, he was shocked. Why did the little girl come with old Chow? The two principals were already exchanging greetings. Yi Qian bowed slightly to the two teachers. It seemed that he would disturb Principal Chen after he was done with his work. He did not go to the classroom. Instead, he went to Njiesen's dormitory and waited for the last class to end. Chapter 97. I just bumped into a student from your school. She's not bad. As soon as he entered the office, Principal Chow mentioned Yi Qian, who he had bumped into in the car. He looked very interested. Her endurance is not bad. Is she a sports special student? He admired Yi Qian. Principal Chen also felt proud. He smiled and said, "Yi Qian. Her name is Yi Qian. Old Chow, your taste is still as sharp as ever." He turned around and handed a cup of tea to Principal Chow. "Try this. It's a new tea from the mountains." The two principals had known each other for many years, so there was no need for formalities. They were more familiar with each other like old colleagues. "It's good tea. It's not any worse than the tea outside." Principal Chow took a sip and smiled at his old colleague who wanted to change the topic. "Come, let's continue talking about Yi Qian. Our country has achieved good results in sports competitions in the past 2 years. However, we still have some regrets in track and field, long-distance running, and sprinting. I think Yi Qian is a good seedling in this area. She can definitely develop in this direction." Principal Chow, who was an athlete, had always liked to explore the potential of students in sports in various secondary schools. If he nurtured them well, they would not only bring glory to the school but also to the country. As the top high school in the province, the sports special students from first high school had all achieved good results in various competitions. A few students had even made it to the university games and achieved amazing results. However, Principal Chen was not very interested in this. He took a sip of tea and smiled. "This child is indeed not bad. She is excellent in all aspects. However, I don't plan to let her achieve good results in sports." "Why is that?" Principal Chow said in surprise. "This is not your style, old Chen." Downstairs in the office, the arrival of the two teachers from first high school made the teachers in the office very happy. This showed how much importance first high school placed on this competition. The stacks of test papers that were brought over from the province's #1 high school were distributed to the class teachers of the second and third year classes. Suddenly, the entire office was filled with the smell of books and ink. It really became a sea of learning. When Teacher Ku came in, he saw Class 1's homeroom teacher, Teacher Lu, actively recommending several top students in his class. His face was sharp and mean and he snorted coldly. Then he changed his face and walked over with a smile. When Teacher Lu saw her, she smiled and said, "Teacher Song, this is Teacher Ku from Class 2. Yi Ying and Yi Qian are Teacher Ku's students." At the mention of Yi Qian, the smile on Teacher Ku's face was quite deep, but when he heard Yi Qian's name, his smile froze. Teacher Lu should be done with his work, right? "Do you mind if I speak to Teacher Song?" With a fake smile, Teacher Ku stared at Teacher Lu, who thought that he had given her a difficult problem. She smiled coldly and said, "Let me speak to the students in my class. I'm afraid Teacher Lu doesn't know much about them." The teachers in the office were used to her sarcastic tone. Teacher Lu smiled disapprovingly and was busy distributing the test papers from first high school to the teachers of each subject. Mr. Song from first high school frowned slightly. His impression of Mr. Ku suddenly became much worse. As a teacher he didn't say much, but his attitude was a little cold. Chapter 98. Yi Qian, who was in the dormitory, had no idea that Teacher Ku was trying her best to discredit her. She said to Injesin, "I bought a few sets of test papers. Let's do them together tomorrow. There are midterm exams next week, and the provincial high school exams on Saturday, Sunday, and Sunday. It's going to be a little hard to endure for 4 consecutive days." She even sighed, which made Injesin roll her eyes. All right. You're the most stressful person in class. You even took leave. You don't know how dark Teacher Ku's expression is today. The whole class is living in fear and trepidation, afraid of provoking her bad luck. Zhang Na, who was in the same dormitory as her, said emotionally, "None of us dare to go near her. Yi Qian, the whole class is waiting for you to come back and destroy Teacher Ku's dark expression." "Are you sure I can do it?" Yi Qian raised her eyebrows and smiled at the girls who nodded in agreement. "I didn't go to the classroom because I was afraid that you would be washed away by the storm. That's why I waited for you in the dormitory." The students more or less knew that Yi Qian and Teacher Ku did not have a good teacher-student relationship. Hearing this they all laughed coquettishly. Sometimes they really admired Yi Qian. She was the only one who could withstand Teacher Ku's gaze. If it were any other student, their legs would have turned to jelly, or they would have transferred classes. Yi Ying's voice came from outside. She was still full of confidence. The girls in the dormitory snorted at the same time and said to Yi Qian, "Recently, Gao Yiyang has been coming to the classroom from time to tutor us. The two of them are sitting together openly. In the end, Teacher Ku even told us to learn from them. It can't be helped. Those two have always been in the top 5 of the cohort." Zhang Na snorted in dissatisfaction and rolled her eyes. It's obvious that they're in love at a young age. The pettiness of a little girl could be seen at a glance. Yi Qian pursed her lips and laughed softly. It was already dinner time for the school. When they reached the cafeteria, Jessen gently poked Yi Qian's forearm with her finger. Do you see? She's smiling like a flower. I also suspect that the two of them are dating." At the entrance of the cafeteria, the smiling Yi Ying and the tall and cold Gao Yiyang walked in together. The two of them immediately attracted countless gazes with various meanings. The people involved did not seem to care at all. They chatted and laughed as they walked towards Yi Qian and the others. It was inevitable that they would bump into each other. As soon as Gao Yiyang saw Yi Qian, he remembered how she had kicked him in his car. His cold face revealed a trace of uneasiness as he said to Yi Ying, "Go line up over there. There are fewer people." Yi Ying, who had always been scheming, glanced at Gao Yiyang's face and narrowed her beautiful eyes. "Why do I feel like he and Yi Qian are hiding something from me?" He smiled naturally and generously. "It's okay, it's the same no matter where you line it up. Didn't the head of teaching say that? After dinner, let's hurry to the teacher's office. Let's queue here." After she finished speaking, she naturally tugged on Gao Yiyang's sleeve and lined up behind Yi Qian. In that instant, Jessen understood why Yi Qian said that she was not simple. If she were in Yi Qian's shoes, she would feel uncomfortable standing in the same place as someone who had bad blood with them. But fine, Yi Qian was not simple either. Seeing her nonchalant expression, Jessen shrugged, indicating that she did not care either. Chapter 99. Principal Qin, Principal Chao, and the teachers from the provincial first high school were all sitting in the meeting room after dinner. At the same time, there were also the homeroom teachers from the 2nd and 3rd grades. No one said anything. They were all waiting for the two principals to finish reading the list. Teacher Ku, who was sitting in the middle, froze when he saw Headmaster Chen flipping through the registration form for the 2nd year of middle school. He had never seen the headmaster attend any competitions in the past. Why was he looking at it this time? There were 7 grades in the 2nd grade. 5 to 6 students from each grade would sign up for the competition. They were all the top 10 students in the class. Headmaster Chen flipped through all the registration forms for the 2nd year of junior high school, but he didn't see Yi Jian's registration form. "Teacher Ku, can I see the name list of Yi Qian's students?" Principal Chen closed the registration form and looked sharply at Teacher Ku, who had repeatedly made things difficult for Yi Qian. He said in a deep voice, "Teacher Ku, please hand it over personally." Teacher Ku's face was pale. She stood up quickly. Under the gaze of her colleagues, her face burned painfully. "I'm sorry. I forgot to take it. I'll go get it right away." It was as if they were fleeing for their lives. 5 minutes later, Principal Chao held Yi Qian's registration form and said with interest, "She's very confident. She signed up for everything." He glanced at Teacher Ku, who had not lifted her head since she came in. He chuckled and said, if she's really an all-rounder, it's not impossible to make an exception and admit her. She doesn't know anything. Teacher Ku, who had her head lowered, panicked when she heard this. She looked up and explained, Principal Chao Yiqian is a bad student. There's no such thing as a top student, and there's no such thing as a bad student. Teacher Ku, please be careful with your words. Principal Chao interrupted her with a smile and said kindly, whether she's a bad student or not, we'll know in the exam today. The self-study session is at 7 o'clock. Teachers, please get ready. The first mock exam will be at 7 o'clock sharp. No one listened to her explanation. They all stood up to inform their students. In the dean's office, Teacher Ku handed over the 2 test papers. The 2 of you are representing the school. Take a look at this first. After 7 o'clock you will have a mock exam. Thank you, Director Ku. When Yi Ying heard this, she could not wait to reach out her hand. However, she was pulled back by Gao Yang. He said coldly, are you asking us to cheat? When he said that, Yi Ying became anxious. Gao Yang. What nonsense are you spouting? Dean Ku wants us to do better. He wants us to look at the questions in advance, not the answers. Wasn't reading the questions in advance cheating? Yi Qian, who was personally informed by Principal Chen, smiled faintly. Don't worry, I've said it before. Yi Ying is the opponent I need to defeat. So, how could I let her have the chance to defeat me? So what if she has seen the test papers? I can still win beautifully. Her face was full of confidence, and there was even a hint of disdain in her jet-black eyes. Principal Chen, who was originally a little worried, raised his eyebrows and laughed heartily. If you want to suppress your opponent, little girl, then you have to give him a hard time. Even if he does, he has to be below you. This was only natural. How could he let Yi Ying have her way? In the temporary classroom of grade 12 class 1, Yi Qian took out one of the test papers and handed the rest to the students behind him. He picked up a pen and started writing.